Mere exposure familiarity effect. You pass someone in the hallway 3 times a week, barely register their face at first. A month in, they start to seem familiar. 2 months, and you catch yourself thinking they're attractive, even though they haven't changed one bit. Your brain just got comfortable with the sight of them. This isn't love, and it isn't even conscious preference. It's what happens when exposure accumulates. The psychologist Robert Zajonc mapped this quiet force and called it the mere exposure effect, and it shapes attraction in ways you rarely see coming. Your nervous system is saying something simple. I have seen this a lot, so it must be safe, so it must be good. Repetition breeds preference like a plant growing toward light. Not dramatic, just steady. Musicians know it. Radio stations weaponize it. People use it too, sometimes deliberately and sometimes without realizing. The trap is that familiarity and attraction feel identical in your body. You spend weeks around someone at the same coffee shop, same friend group, same gym, and gradually exposure shifts into something that feels like real liking. You might even rewrite history, convincing yourself there was chemistry from day one, when really your system was just warming to a repeated stimulus. It accelerates if they're already somewhat likable. Then exposure amplifies what was already there, making it feel inevitable. But here's the quiet truth to carry with you. Comfort is not the same as genuine spark. Comfort is real and has value. You can build something real on it. But comfort alone won't tell you if someone truly chose you or if you simply chose them because they were always there. Notice which people make you feel electric or seen versus which ones just feel like they belong in the familiar rotation. That small distinction might save you from mistaking safety for passion, proximity, and repeated contact. You walk past the same coffee counter every morning. The barista knows your order by the 3rd visit. By the 10th, she's smiling before you speak. By the 50th, you've asked her name. By the 100th, you're wondering if what you feel is genuine attraction or just the comfort of familiarity. The answer, uncomfortable as it sounds, might be both at once, and you can't really untangle them. Your brain doesn't separate them. Proximity, the fact of being near someone repeatedly, rewires your nervous system toward them. Neuroscientists call it the mere exposure effect. Show someone a face 100 times and their brain literally begins to prefer it. Even if nothing about the face has changed, your nervous system gets quiet around it. Quiet feels like home. Home feels like attraction. The coffee shop is a small example, but this pattern lives everywhere. Coworkers who sit near you, classmates in the same section, the neighbor you see in the hallway, the person at your gym at the same hour. Repeated contact doesn't just make you notice them, it reorganizes your feelings about them slowly and beneath awareness. You start reading neutral expressions as kind. You start remembering small things they said. You start building a version of them that may or may not exist. The crucial part, this happens without conscious effort. You don't decide it. Your amygdala doesn't ask permission. The effect is so reliable that entire industries are built on it. Show someone an ad enough times and they buy the product. Show someone a face enough times and they want the person. None of this means attraction born from proximity is false or shallow. It means attraction is a janitor, not a judge. It cleans up the familiar and calls it love. Halo effect from beauty. Someone walks into a room and the light shifts. Not literally, but you feel it. They're beautiful in that way that makes you pause mid-thought, and within seconds, before they've said anything at all, you've already written their entire character. They're kind. They're probably smart. They have their life together. That instant multiplication of virtue from one bright thing is the halo effect, and it has almost nothing to do with what you actually know about them. Your brain saw one luminous quality and decided to flood the entire person with goodness. A stunning voice makes you assume intelligence. Clear skin and symmetry convince you good character must follow. One real or imagined quality casts a glow over everything else, and you stop seeing edges. Here's where it gets sticky. You don't just admire them differently. You interpret their entire behavior through that light. They cancel plans. They must be busy with something important, not flaky. They're quiet at a party. They're probably deep and thoughtful, not anxious or bored. The same exact action gets a completely different story when someone's already glowing. And the person inside that halo often feels it too. They move through the world with a confidence that comes from being believed in before they've earned it. They get more chances, more grace, more benefit of the doubt. It compounds over time, year after year, becoming a real advantage, permission to take up space, to try things, to fail, and be forgiven. The real snare isn't attraction to beauty itself. That's ancient and human. It's that beauty hijacks your judgment so completely you don't notice it's happening. You feel like you're seeing clearly when you're actually seeing through a lens you can't remove. The next time you catch yourself deciding someone is fundamentally good or interesting before they've spoken, pause and breathe into that moment. You might be right about them, but you might also be looking at light instead of a person, facial symmetry preference. Go look in the mirror for a second and trace a line down the middle of your face. Your nose tilts slightly. One eye sits a fraction higher. Your smile pulls a little to one side. You're not twins with yourself, and that's almost universal. Yet when you see someone and feel that strange pull of attraction, symmetry plays a role you never consciously noticed. Here's what's wild. We don't prefer perfect symmetry, but we do notice when something is off symmetrically, and it registers as less attractive. It's not about math or geometry. It's about what symmetry might signal about someone's health. A face that developed evenly often means fewer infections, better nutrition, fewer genetic hiccups during development. Your brain, working below consciousness, is reading a health report written in the proportions of someone's cheekbones and the spacing of their features. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is where the trap really lives. We think we're attracted to symmetry because of some objective truth about beauty, when really we're attracted to the signal of genetic robustness and developmental stability. And that signal changes wildly with culture, lighting, context, and the angle of a single photograph. A slight asymmetry that reads as character and depth in one culture reads as a flaw in another. Online dating apps flatten this completely. A photo taken at one precise angle with one kind of light distorts asymmetry into something it isn't in real life, real conversation, real touch. So when you feel that instant pull towards someone's face, pause for a moment. You're not responding to mathematics or objective facts about attractiveness. You're responding to what their face whispers about their history and their body's capacity. And whispers, even ancient ones echoing from deep in your brain, can absolutely be wrong. Averageness, attractiveness, paradox. A researcher sits in a lab one afternoon feeding 50 photographs into software that overlays them pixel by pixel, nose to nose, eye to eye, then blends every face into one composite image. What emerges is mathematically unremarkable and mathematically perfect, smooth, symmetrical, no distinctive marks or sharp edges, no visible history written into the jaw. just the invisible middle ground made visible, and somehow it pulls. You don't wake up thinking, I want the most generic face possible, but your eyes do the work without asking permission. When you're scrolling through strangers or standing in a room full of new people, the ones closest to that mathematical center tend to catch your attention first. The evolutionary logic is ancient. Average faces historically signaled genetic health, no rare mutations expressing themselves in lopsided proportions or unusual angles. Your brain learned to read centered as viable, and that wiring still runs underneath your conscious preferences. But here's where it gets complicated. This instinct can narrow beauty into a flattening force that punishes the particular. Distinctive noses, asymmetries, the specific marks that make someone unmistakably themselves become visual friction in a system built to reward the middle. And yet real attraction, the kind that lasts and deepens, almost always breaks this pattern wide open. The moment someone's weird, unaverage, totally particular face becomes familiar, the moment you actually know them, your brain reweights everything. Novelty and specificity can overtake mathematical averageness almost overnight. You stop seeing the asymmetry as a flaw and start seeing them as a person. The real paradox holds both directions at once. You reach for average when you're strangers in a crowd, but you love the particular once you're close enough to know it. The danger is mistaking that first instinct for the whole story of what you actually want, letting a stranger's proximity to the mathematical center override the pull of someone whose face you'd recognize anywhere. Waist to hip signaling. Your body is constantly broadcasting information to everyone around you, and the ratio between your waist and hips is one of those signals that travels faster than words, so fast, in fact, that your brain registers it in milliseconds before you've even consciously noticed someone's face. That whisper is sending signals about health, fertility, and genetic fitness that bypass your rational mind entirely. And it's not because some designer in the 18th century decided it should be this way. Evolution cares less about your personality than your body's ability to thrive and reproduce, and that biological logic still hums underneath every attraction you feel, even if you'd rather it didn't. It's not shallow, it's ancient. Now, here's what keeps showing up across time and culture. While societies have definitely celebrated different body types, different weights, different heights, different skin tones, the waist-to-hip ratio itself stays relatively consistent as an attractiveness marker. An hourglass shape, where the waist is notably smaller compared to the hips and shoulders, keeps appearing in male preferences across wildly different eras and geographies. That doesn't mean thin or thick, it means proportion. A woman with roughly a 0.7 ratio, say a 24-inch waist with hips around 34 inches, tends to trigger something in male neurology that other ratios often don't. And the science backs this up repeatedly in partner preference studies. But here's where it stops being deterministic. Knowing this doesn't make you a prisoner to it. Understanding that your body broadcasts information doesn't mean you have to perform attraction for anyone or feel obligated by what it communicates. The waist-hip signal is real, measurable, and ancient, but attraction itself is far more negotiable than your biology suggests. You can acknowledge the whisper your body sends while choosing exactly who gets to listen and on what terms. That's the freedom that comes after the science. Voice pitch and desirability. Listen to someone speak with your eyes closed, just their voice, no face, no context, and feel what your body does without asking permission. Within seconds, your nervous system has already started the work of measuring, assessing, deciding what it wants to feel. Voice pitch is one of the first signals your brain uses to calculate attractiveness, and the pattern holds weirdly consistent across cultures and centuries. Lower voices in people perceived as men tend to signal maturity, testosterone, and biological health. Higher voices in people perceived as women can suggest youth, fertility, and reproductive value. None of this happens consciously. It lives in the basement of your mind before you even know you're being drawn toward someone. But here's where it gets knotted. That same low voice you find attractive might also signal aggression, dominance, or a kind of control that makes you nervous. That higher pitch you find charming might code as less authoritative the moment someone steps into a boardroom or a position of power. Same frequency, two completely different contexts. A voice that pulls you towards someone sexually can simultaneously push you away professionally. The real stickiness comes from how easily you can be manipulated through it. Voice modulators exist now. Singers train their range. People learn to drop their pitch on important calls or raise it when they want to seem approachable and non-threatening. You've probably done it yourself without thinking, deepening your voice to sound more serious, lightening it to seem friendlier or more vulnerable. Here's what matters. Attraction isn't stupid, but it is fast. Your body responds to pitch before your mind can fact-check what it's hearing. The person on the podcast with the warm, measured voice has likely trained it carefully. The person you're texting might be performing too. None of this means attraction is fake or hollow. It just means the signal you're responding to is sometimes half chosen, half constructed by the person sending it. Knowing that doesn't kill the feeling. It just adds a layer to how you listen. Scent and immune compatibility. Your nose knows things your brain hasn't caught up to yet. When you lean into someone's neck and breathe, you're not just being romantic, you're running a chemical census. Your immune system has spent your entire life building defenses against specific threats. It learned to fight the viruses your family carried, the bacteria in your neighborhood, the particular soup of infections that shaped you. And now, through something called the Major Histocompatibility Complex, or MHC, your body broadcasts that history through your sweat, your skin, the volatile compounds rising off you like an invisible signature. Someone who smells right to you likely carries immune genes different enough from yours that your kids would inherit a broader defense system, more weapons against more invaders. Someone whose scent you find repulsive might be immunologically too similar or carrying a profile that would create gaps in your future offspring's protection. Evolution didn't leave this to chance or poetry. It built it into your olfactory cortex, a system that predates conscious preference by millions of years. The wild part is how quiet this works. You don't think, his immune profile complements mine. You just know he smells good or he doesn't. A spray of cologne or perfume can cover it temporarily, but people in long-term relationships often report that their partner's scent shifts, becomes more appealing or less, as stress, illness, and life cycle change their biochemistry. This is why first attraction often happens below the threshold of words. Your body met his body and did the math faster than your mind could narrate it. If you find yourself drawn to someone in a way you can't quite explain or repelled by someone who looks perfect on paper, your nose might be wiser than you are. Ovulatory shift in preference. Your girlfriend suddenly finds her ex's jawline irresistible. Your partner is drawn to the confident guy at the gym they normally wouldn't glance at. Then, 2 weeks later, neither of them cares. If you've noticed this rhythm in a woman's taste or felt it yourself, You're watching biology move the needle on attraction in real time. During the fertile window of the menstrual cycle, women tend toward stronger signals of genetic fitness, symmetrical faces, deeper voices, more masculine features. It's not deliberate, it's a tilt in the nervous system, a biological amplifier turning up the volume on traits that whisper good genes. A few days later, when fertility drops, the preference often swings back toward stability, kindness, and reliability, the traits that signal someone who will actually stick around and build something lasting. This isn't about being shallow or inconsistent. It's a push and pull between two competing needs that evolution wired into you. Right now, maximize genetic quality. The rest of the time, prioritize stability. What makes this tricky in modern relationships is that we treat attraction as if it's static and intentional, when really it's partially choreographed by hormones you don't feel consciously. You might watch someone suddenly light up around a person you find boring, and you're watching fertility biology in real time, a system that doesn't care about relationship goals or what makes logical sense. The thing worth sitting with is that attraction isn't fully in your control, and that's true for everyone. When you notice your own preferences shift across weeks or months, pause and ask whether you're responding to something genuinely real about a person or responding to a biological window that will close. That awareness alone reshapes how you build relationships because it lets you hold your attractions more lightly and make choices that aren't just riding the hormonal tide. Testosterone facial markers. Walk into any room and your face is already broadcasting something about your body's chemistry, and people are reading it, whether they know it or not. A man with a stronger jaw, wider face, and more defined cheekbones tends to signal higher testosterone levels, and studies show that strangers pick up on this almost instantly. But here's where it gets strange. That same face that reads as dominant and attractive in a quick glance also tends to correlate with immune suppression and less parental investment. Evolution played a cruel joke. The markers of genetic strength often come bundled with traits that make someone a less reliable partner or parent. Your brain notices the jaw. Your brain also notices the trade-off, even if you can't name it. Women's preferences shift across their cycle partly because of this calculation. During peak fertility, the attraction to these markers spikes, but outside that window, many women show stronger preference for faces that look healthier overall rather than purely masculine. The testosterone-marked face reads as exciting stranger to one part of your brain and unreliable to another, and men unconsciously adjust too. Studies show that men in committed relationships often display slightly lower testosterone markers than single men, as if the body itself dials down the aggressive signaling when loyalty matters more. The real trick is understanding that you're not reading character from a jawline. You're reading a biological trade-off written in the symmetry and proportions of someone's face. That attraction you feel is real, but it's not a verdict on who someone is. It's your nervous system noting what's written in bone and hormone, then layering story on top of it. The signal itself doesn't tell you about kindness or commitment. Knowing the difference between signal and story changes how you listen to what you actually feel. Neoteny and youthful cues. Watch a room the moment someone holds a baby. Heads tilt, voices soften, defenses drop. That oversized head, those enormous eyes, that round face engineered for dependency, they bypass your rational mind entirely. The same ancient circuitry activates when you feel that pull towards someone attractive. Neoteny is the retention of juvenile features into adulthood, and your brain reads those signals as innocence, openness, vitality, fertility. Large eyes, smooth skin, a soft jawline, a smaller nose, they whisper that someone carries youth, health, reproductive potential. Evolution didn't build this detector for shallow reasons. It built it because these markers genuinely correlated with fitness and capability to thrive. Look at modern beauty culture, and you'll see this machinery at work everywhere. Foundation that blurs skin texture, eyeshadow that makes eyes appear larger, lip fillers that create that plump, unsculpted fullness of infancy. We're not randomly chasing trends. We're trying to trigger the primal circuitry that reads juvenility as magnetic. This works across gender lines, across cultures, across centuries. A man with softer features, less angular jaw, fuller lips benefits from the same pull as anyone else. Youthfulness doesn't mean being a teenager. It means retaining a quality of openness, a lack of hardness, a face that hasn't calcified into stone. Someone who has lived decades can still carry it if their eyes hold softness, if their face still moves, if vulnerability still lives somewhere in their expression. The real trap is calling this shallow. Your attraction to vitality and health markers isn't shallow. It's written so deep into your neurology that sophistication can't erase it, only hide it. But knowing it's there means you can notice when you're drawn to someone purely for those cues versus when those cues are the opening note in something that goes much deeper. The best attractions speak both languages at once. Red color arousal effect. There's a reason red dress codes show up at dating events, not board meetings. When you see red on a person, a room, a lipstick, something shifts in your nervous system before your conscious mind even catches up. Your pupils dilate slightly, blood pressure ticks up. That's not poetry, that's neurology. Red is the color of urgency, of heat, of resources worth competing for. Your ancient brain still thinks that way, even if you're just looking at a first date across a coffee table. Studies have shown people rate faces, bodies, and voices as more attractive when the context around them is red, and they're quicker to approach someone wearing it. A red jacket doesn't make someone more intelligent or kinder. It just hijacks the attention system that once meant ripeness or power or danger worth noticing. The effect happens fast enough that it sits below the line of your awareness, which means you're vulnerable to mistaking arousal for attraction. That accelerated heartbeat feels like chemistry. Those narrowed pupils feel like desire, but they might just be your animal wiring reacting to a color. The remarkable part is that this works across cultures and ages, suggesting something deeply wired into you, not learned from Instagram or fashion magazines. It's almost as if your body speaks a language older than language itself, one that still remembers what red meant when it meant survival. So when you're getting ready for a moment that matters, understand what you're reaching for. That red isn't manipulation. It's honest. It's saying, look at me, pay attention, I'm worth your focus. And if you're on the receiving end, just know what's happening in your chest isn't the whole story. It's an opening, not proof. Your lizard brain is voting yes before your mind gets to weigh in. Dilated pupils signaling interest. Walk into a room where someone catches your eye, and within a fraction of a second, before a single word lands, your pupils expand. You can't feel it happening. They can't consciously see it either, most of the time. But something in their nervous system registers the shift, a tiny doorway opening in the center of your eye. It's one of the oldest tells in human attraction, a betrayal of genuine interest that no amount of practiced cool can fully suppress. Pupils dilate in response to light, sure, but they also dilate when you're looking at something your brain deems worthy of attention, someone attractive, someone interesting, someone your body has decided deserves more visual data. The strange part is how contagious it becomes. When you notice dilated pupils in someone looking at you, your own pupils tend to dilate back, a biological mirror match that deepens the sense of mutual interest. It's not conscious flirtation, it's older than language. This is why dim lighting in bars and restaurants isn't just romantic, it naturally causes everyone's pupils to widen, creating an automatic amplification of perceived interest, whether it's there or not. Which means the person across from you might not actually be fascinated. The darkness just made them look it. But here's what matters. If someone genuinely wants to connect with you, no amount of bad lighting or caffeine jitters will keep their pupils completely flat. The dilation happens in spite of themselves. You might catch it in a moment of conversation that felt particularly real, or in the seconds before they remember to be guarded again. That micro expression of genuine interest is harder to fake than a smile, easier to read than words, and one of the purest signals of whether someone sees you as worth their focus. Eye contact and dopamine. Someone holds your gaze across a room and suddenly your chest feels lighter. Not because anything was said, but because of what wasn't. That locked look triggers a small surge of dopamine, the neurotransmitter that makes everything feel a little more alive, a little more worth paying attention to. It's not magic. It's biology dressed up in a moment that feels intimate. When another person meets your eyes directly, your brain reads it as validation, as you are worth looking at. And that signal hits differently than a compliment ever could. The eyes are the only window where another nervous system can touch yours without contact. Your pupils even dilate when you see someone attractive. It's involuntary, genuine, and they can see it happening. That visible sign of your own interest creates a feedback loop. They see your pupils widen and feel their own dopamine kick in. You notice them noticing, and it intensifies. This is why prolonged eye contact feels so charged, so impossible to sustain casually. The longer two people lock in, the more both brains are swimming in the same chemical bath, and attachment starts whispering its first suggestions. But here's where it gets quiet and important. Dopamine also makes us believe things feel more true. If someone is making eye contact while they talk, you are more likely to believe what they say, trust them faster, feel seen by them. This is useful when it's genuine connection. It becomes dangerous when someone knows this and uses it anyway. So the next time eye contact hits you like a small current, notice it. Notice whether it feels mutual or one-sided, generous or hungry. That awareness might be the only thing standing between connection and the kind of belief that costs you later. Prolonged gaze bonding ritual. There's a moment in attraction that doesn't involve words at all, just two people looking at each other for longer than polite conversation usually allows. Most of us glance and look away. It feels too raw, too much like exposure. But when two people hold that gaze, something shifts in the nervous system. The pupils dilate slightly, the amygdala quiets, and oxytocin, the bonding chemical, begins to rise. You're not just seeing them, you're being seen, and that mutual vulnerability creates a small thread of trust between two strangers or deepens one that already exists. This is why locked eyes feel electric. Your brain is literally reading micro expressions in their face, the softness around their eyes, the slight relaxation of their jaw, and you're broadcasting the same signals back. It's a feedback loop of safety. In dating research, couples who maintain eye contact during vulnerable conversations report higher satisfaction and deeper intimacy, not because they said anything special, but because they stayed present through the discomfort. Your instinct to look away is old. It protected you from predators by avoiding challenge. But when you sit with that discomfort, you signal, I'm not a threat. I'm here for you. The practical move is small but potent. Next time you're talking to someone you're drawn to, notice when you want to break the gaze and don't immediately. Stay for one more breath, maybe two. Watch what happens in their face. Most people will soften, some will smile, a few will lean in slightly. You're not manipulating them. You're simply allowing the bonding mechanism to do what it evolved to do. What feels like a simple look is actually your nervous system and theirs learning to trust each other in real time. That's where real attraction lives, not in the story you tell about them later, but in the quiet courage it takes to be seen. Mirroring and postural echo. Watch two people fall into real conversation at a bar, and something strange happens without either of them knowing. If one leans left, the other leans left a moment later. If one crosses their arms, the other follows. Their breathing even syncs. Slow, then slower. This isn't choreography. It's mirroring, and it's one of the quietest signals that attraction is building between two bodies. When you mirror someone, you're unconsciously saying, I see you, I'm like you, I belong in your space. The person being mirrored feels it as warmth, as safety, as a strange sense of being understood before a single real thing was even said. But here's where it gets sticky. Mirroring works both directions. Someone mirrors you and your nervous system relaxes. You feel drawn to them without knowing why. You think it's about their laugh or their face, but it's really about the fact that their body language told yours that you were safe together. This is why you'll sometimes meet someone attractive who makes you feel tense. They're not mirroring you, so your body is stuck in alert mode. And why you'll meet someone less traditionally beautiful and walk away thinking there's something about them. Their posture echoed yours. Their pace matched your pace. Now here's the trap that keeps people stuck. Once you know mirroring exists, some people try to do it consciously, copying someone's gestures to manufacture attraction. But artificial mirroring reads as mockery or manipulation. Your nervous system knows the difference between genuine synchrony and performance. Real mirroring happens when you're actually present and interested, not thinking about it. So if you want to build that quiet pull with someone, forget the playbook. Lean in because you're curious. Match their tempo because the conversation has rhythm. Let your body say yes before your mind is even sure. Interactional synchrony rhythm. Watch two people fall into real connection and you'll notice something almost invisible. Their breathing starts to line up, their head tilts mirror each other, even the pace of their speech falls into sync. This isn't choreography. Nobody learned the steps. It happens automatically when two nervous systems decide to trust each other. And the weird part is that you can feel it before you ever think about it. Your body knows. When someone is genuinely into you, you both slow down a little. Your blink rates sync. If one person leans in, the other naturally matches that lean. Psychologists call this interactional synchrony, the biological rhythm that says, we are in this together. And here's what makes it stick. Synchrony creates safety. Your brain is constantly running a background check on whether the person across from you is a threat or an ally. And one of the fastest ways it figures that out is by checking if your rhythms align. Mismatch feels wrong. You can't quite name it, but something feels off. Then you meet someone whose breath and pace and energy mirrors yours, and suddenly the world feels easier. You laugh at the same moments. You both reach for water at the same time. The connection feels magnetic because your nervous systems are literally speaking the same language. Here's the catch, though. Real synchrony can't be faked. You can mimic someone's posture, sure, but you can't fake the microrhythms, the tiny delays in response, the breathing pattern, the genuine stillness. If you're trying to impress someone by copying them, they'll feel the absence of real rhythm underneath. But if you show up present and unhurried, if you actually listen instead of performing listening, synchrony happens on its own. That's when attraction becomes effortless. Approach anxiety physiology. Your palms get wet, your chest tightens, you see someone you're drawn to across a room, and your body suddenly feels like it belongs to someone else. Someone braver, maybe, or someone whose nervous system doesn't have quite such an enthusiastic relationship with catastrophe. That isn't weakness or cowardice. That's your ancient threat detection system doing exactly what it evolved to do, which is treat social rejection like a tiger in the grass. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference between public humiliation and physical death, so it treats both the same way. Flood your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline, narrow your vision, tighten your muscles, make you want to run or freeze. It's brilliant for escaping predators. It's terrible for saying hello to someone attractive. The real move, the one that shifts everything, is understanding that what you're feeling isn't a command to stop. It's just your body being overprotective, like a parent who won't let their kid off the porch because, statistically, someone might trip. The physiology is real and it will stay present. What changes is your relationship to it. When you approach anyway, your nervous system learns something crucial. Social contact doesn't end you. Each small interaction, a brief smile, a casual question, even a rejection, becomes evidence that the tiger was never there. And that evidence compounds quietly, layer by layer. Over time, your threat detection system recalibrates itself. The anxiety doesn't disappear. It just quiets to something manageable, something you can move through without waiting for permission. So if you feel that squeeze in your chest before you speak to someone, notice it without waiting for it to leave. It's not the stop sign you think it is. It's just noise from an old, worried part of your brain trying to keep you safe, and you can thank it and move anyway. Rejection, sensitivity spiral. You send a text to someone you like, and they don't reply for 3 hours. 3 hours. You know they're on their phone. You just watch their Instagram story, and suddenly your stomach tightens. Maybe they're upset with you. Maybe they've decided you're not worth it. By the time they answer with something casual and kind, you're already half convinced they never liked you in the first place. That reaction lives in rejection sensitivity, not the fear of rejection itself, but the way your nervous system treats ambiguity like a threat. It's the difference between knowing someone might disappoint you and feeling like they definitely will. For some people, often those who've been hurt early or felt invisible, rejection sensitivity is a hair trigger alarm system that goes off at the smallest delay, the shortest text, the neutral emoji. Your brain is trying to protect you by detecting danger first, scanning for the rejection before it can land. But here's where the spiral tightens. Because you expect rejection, you often communicate that expectation without saying a word. You pull back, you become defensive, you read the room as hostile, even when it's just quiet. And then the other person, picking up on your guardedness, actually does pull back, not because they rejected you, but because your body language said you rejected them first. The spiral doesn't start with their disinterest. It starts with you bracing for it, and your bracing becomes the very distance you feared. The quieter move is awareness without action. Notice the tightening, the story spinning, the premature certainty, but don't let it drive your behavior yet. Let the other person show you who they actually are, not who your alarm system predicted. Most of the time, they're gentler than the spiral wanted to believe. Scarcity and perceived value. You've probably noticed how the moment someone says, "only 2 left in stock," your chest does a little thing. Not because you wanted the thing 5 minutes ago, but because now it feels like it might vanish. That tight feeling is scarcity speaking directly to your nervous system, and it works so fast you almost don't notice the mechanism firing. The object didn't change. Your access to it did, and somehow that rewires what it's worth to you. Here's what's wild. We're neurologically wired to protect things we perceive as rare. Back when resources were actually scarce, water, shelter, food, that instinct kept you alive. But in a world of infinite choice and artificial urgency, that same ancient signal gets hijacked. A limited edition shoe, a person who doesn't usually date, a job offer with a tight deadline, they all trigger the same primal alarm. Grab it before it's gone. Your brain treats scarcity as a proxy for value, even when scarcity is completely manufactured. The sleek part is that people who know this use it everywhere. Dating apps show you fewer matches to make each one feel significant. Stores flash countdown timers. Influencers drop exclusive content. None of this is a lie, exactly, but it's lever pulling, and you're the machine being pulled. The catch is that real scarcity and fake scarcity feel identical from the inside. So when someone you're attracted to suddenly seems less available, or an opportunity feels like it's evaporating, you can't always tell whether you're responding to something genuinely rare or a pressure tactic. The sticky move is to pause when you feel that tightness in your chest and ask, would I want this if I had infinite time? If the answer is no, scarcity just did its job. If it's yes, you might be onto something real, playing hard to get. You've probably done this without thinking, replied to a text hours later even though you saw it instantly, or kept yourself busy on a Friday night hoping someone would ask you out instead of making plans solo. The logic feels airtight. Scarcity creates demand, unavailability signals value, mystery keeps them hooked. There's truth in that, just not the whole picture. Playing hard to get filters brilliantly for one specific thing, people who want the chase more than they want you. The person who pursues harder when you're distant might be drawn to the hunt itself, not to who you actually are. That's not foundation. That's a relationship built on performance and hollow wins. The real trap runs deeper. This game trains both of you to confuse effort with caring. You measure his interest by how much he pursues. He measures your interest by how hard you are to reach. You're both keeping score instead of connecting, reading tea leaves instead of asking direct questions, and the exhaustion that follows, constant recalibration, games within games, anxious phone checking at 3 a.m, that's what kills attraction over time, not what builds it. Real lasting attraction grows where you're available enough that someone can actually know you, but discerning enough that not everyone gets you. It's mystery without distance, standards without weaponizing them, knowing your worth versus performing it every single day. The people actually worth keeping don't need you to be hard to get. They're drawn to you consistently, no proof required, no elaborate timing required. And when you find that, You stop needing a strategy because the whole thing becomes genuine instead of tactical. That shift from playing the game to actually being present is where attraction stops being exhausting and starts feeling like home. Intermittent reinforcement attachment. You text them and get nothing for 3 days. Then they reply with 3 words and a heart emoji. You feel electric. Your whole body sits up in the dark and reads it 5 times. Why does the inconsistency hit harder than if they texted you every single day like clockwork? Because your brain is a slot machine, and intermittent payouts are the only addiction that actually works. When a reward comes every time you pull the lever, a text each morning at 8, a compliment every Friday, your dopamine system gets bored. It learns the pattern and stops firing. But when the reward is random, unpredictable, when you get ignored for a week and then suddenly they show up with flowers and your favorite song playing in their car, something primal wakes up. Your nervous system can't relax because it doesn't know when the next hit is coming, so it stays vigilant, checking your phone, analyzing every silence, constructing elaborate theories about their mood. This is how people stay hooked on partners who are emotionally unavailable or hot and cold. Not because the connection is strong, it's often fragile and painful, but because the randomness keeps you on the hook. Your brain wants to solve the puzzle of them. It wants to find the magic formula that makes the good moments happen more often. And that wanting, that ache of unpredictability feels like love. The trap is that you can spend years chasing consistency from someone whose inconsistency is the only reason you're still there. The quieter move is noticing when you feel most alive, not around someone's presence, but around their absence. That flutter isn't love, it's addiction. And it settles down the moment someone shows you what it actually feels like to be chosen reliably. Uncertainty amplifies attraction. You've probably noticed that the person who messages you back in 5 minutes feels less interesting than the one who takes 3 hours. Same words, same person, but the weight, that gap between text and reply, does something wild to your nervous system. Uncertainty doesn't calm attraction down, it cranks the dial up. Your brain starts filling the silence with possibility, with a narrative, with reasons to think about them more. The ambiguity becomes magnetic, almost alive. Think about the last time someone kept you guessing. Maybe they complimented you once and then said nothing for days. Maybe they seemed into you Saturday but distant by Wednesday. You probably thought about them constantly, analyzing every word, every silence, spinning theories about what it all meant. The vagueness wasn't a bug, it became the feature. Certainty is boring. A person who likes you straightforwardly, who's consistent and clear and predictable, your dopamine system yawns. But a person whose interest wavers, whose availability shifts, whose intentions stay just out of focus, that person lives rent-free in your head, taking up space you can't quite evict. Here's the thing, this mechanism evolved for good reason. Pursuing ambiguous targets kept our ancestors alert, motivated, searching for clues and survival signals. But in modern attachment, the same system can trap you in cycles of rumination and false hope. You mistake the anxiety for depth. You confuse the uncertainty with significance. You start believing the person isn't actually that special. Your brain is just doing loop-de-loops, trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle. The sticky part is noticing when you're attracted to someone versus when you're attracted to the uncertainty itself. If you find yourself most invested when you're most confused, that's worth a quiet look. Real connection doesn't require you to be in constant doubt about whether you matter to someone. Misattribution of arousal bridge. A man's heart hammers as he crosses a rickety suspension bridge strung over a ravine, hands slick with sweat. On the other side waits a woman with a questionnaire and her phone number. He calls her days later, far more often than men who crossed a stable bridge nearby, not because danger made her face prettier, but because his racing pulse, his adrenaline, his entire alarm system got tangled up in the sight of her. His nervous system screamed, "Something massive is happening," and his brain whispered, "It's her." That's misattribution of arousal, and it moves through attraction like an invisible current you absolutely feel. The mechanism cuts both ways. Your nervous system doesn't come with labels. You meet someone at a concert where the bass vibrates through your ribs, during an argument that sets your teeth on edge, or right after you've sprinted up 3 flights of stairs. Your body is already flooded. Then they laugh, their hand brushes yours, and suddenly all that arousal meant for the music, the conflict, the exertion gets rerouted toward them. You feel electrically, dangerously alive, and your brain connects dots that might not touch. It wasn't the moment that made you feel this way, it was them. Here's the trap. This doesn't mean the attraction is false. The electricity in your chest is real, but the story about where it came from might be pure invention. Early relationships built on high-stakes circumstances, stressful dates, late-night confessions, someone who unsettles you in that particular way, ride this wave hard. And when the intensity fades and the arousal drains, so does the attraction, because the arousal was doing most of the work all along. Next time you find yourself drawn to someone during moments of real intensity or physical adrenaline, pause. Am I attracted to them or to how alive they make me feel right now? Sometimes both are true. Often only one is. Adrenaline mislabeled as desire. You've probably felt it. That electric sting in your chest when someone walks into the room, or the way your pulse quickens when their name pops up on your phone. Your mind whispers, "I want them," but your body might be running a different story entirely. What you're feeling could be fear dressed up as attraction or nervous energy that your brain is scrambling to make sense of, so it reaches for the closest explanation, desire. The thing is, adrenaline and attraction share almost identical signatures: racing heart, tunnel vision, that pulled tight feeling in your stomach. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between "I'm drawn to this person" and "I'm unsettled by this person." It just floods you with activation and leaves your conscious mind to write the narrative. This gets especially tangled when there's chaos involved. A relationship with unpredictable moments, fights followed by intensity, ghosting followed by sudden attention, creates a cycle that keeps your nervous system jumping. You mistake the relief of reconnection for love. You mistake the anxiety of uncertainty for passion. The cycle itself becomes intoxicating because your body is literally bathed in chemicals that feel like aliveness. But here's the distinction that matters. Real attraction grows quieter over time. The nervous system settles. The heart rate normalizes. Adrenaline-fueled connection often does the opposite. It needs bigger hits, more drama, more disruption to feel alive. When you notice yourself more wired than warm around someone, when you're more preoccupied than peaceful, when the feeling depends on friction rather than ease, pause and ask whether you're actually drawn to them or drawn to the adrenaline itself. That question might save you from chasing a feeling that was never about genuine connection, just the body's hunger for stimulation wearing attraction's mask. Fear-induced bonding intensity. Think about the first time you felt truly safe around someone after feeling terrified. Not in a danger movie way, but the smaller terrors that live closer to home: rejection, humiliation, being truly seen. Then they saw you anyway and didn't flinch, and something shifted in your chest. That sudden warmth isn't just gratitude, it's neurochemistry recognizing a shelter. Your nervous system learned something irreversible. This person is safe. Shelters become magnetic because they're so rare. This is why couples who survive a crisis together often report feeling closer afterward, why people bonded in tight quarters during uncertainty develop a stickiness that casual friendships rarely touch, why hostages sometimes develop complicated feelings for their captors. The brain doesn't distinguish between danger fear and vulnerability fear. Both spike adrenaline, both make you hypervigilant, both create hunger for relief. When someone shows up in that storm, they become the antidote. Your threat detection system quiets specifically around them. Dopamine floods the relief, and suddenly they feel like home. But here's where it gets tricky. This bonding feels like love, but it's partly just contrast. You're not attracted to them so much as attracted to the absence of fear they witnessed. That's why people sometimes stay in unstable relationships. The making up feels profound because the down was so low, the gap so wide. The intensity you feel is real, but it's tethered to the crisis, not to lasting compatibility. When the fear fades, that electric neediness, that sense they're irreplaceable, comes from the gap between terror and safety, not from who they are over time. If someone feels magnetic to you right now, pause and ask whether you're drawn to them or drawn to how they quiet the noise in your head. Both can exist. They're just not the same thing. One builds a life, the other builds an echo that fades when the storm passes. Excitation transfer effect. You just watched a horror movie with someone. Your heart is pounding. You step outside into the cool air, and suddenly that person looks magnetic. Your nervous system is still flooded with adrenaline. Your pupils dilated. You're breathing fast, and your brain is searching for a reason. It finds one, must be attraction. This is excitation transfer, and it rewires how you feel about people in moments without you even noticing. The science is elegant and a little embarrassing. Any arousal, anger from a fight, adrenaline from a chase scene, even exhaustion from running gets misattributed. Your body doesn't distinguish between I'm scared and I'm excited. So when you meet someone, while you're already activated, your nervous system adds that energy to how you perceive them. They seem brighter, more interesting, more magnetic. This explains why people often form intense connections at concerts, during arguments, or after extreme activities. The connection isn't false exactly, but it's turbocharged by something that has nothing to do with the person themselves. The tricky part is knowing it's happening and still feeling it anyway. You can know the movie cranked your system up and still find yourself leaning closer. You can recognize the adrenaline from the stressful day and still feel drawn to the person who's suddenly right there. Your rational mind can watch the mechanism, and your body keeps the show running anyway. It's not that you're fooling yourself, it's that arousal is arousal, and your body doesn't care where it came from. If you want to actually know how you feel about someone, the quiet moments matter more than you think. The ones where there's no spike, no external rush, no movie or argument or racing pulse, just the two of you sitting still and whatever you actually have. That's where the real signal lives, in the absence of noise. Reward prediction, error craving. Think about the last time you checked your phone hoping for a message that didn't come. That sting you felt wasn't disappointment about the absence. It was your brain's alarm going off because reality didn't match the possibility it had already started building. Your dopamine system doesn't fire when you get what you expect. It fires when the world surprises you, when the gap between prediction and reality suddenly opens up. This gap is called reward prediction error, and your brain learns from it obsessively. If a partner texted you within the last few hours, your brain predicts the next check might bring one too. That prediction creates a tiny jolt of anticipation. When nothing arrives, the error signal fires, a sense of absence that feels almost like loss. And here's where attraction becomes a trap. The unpredictable reward is 10 times more magnetic than the reliable one. A partner who texts sporadically becomes more urgent than one who always responds. A glance that might mean something matters more than consistent warmth. Your brain literally gets hooked on the gap, on the possibility that this time the prediction might be wrong in your favor. Uncertainty feels more attractive than certainty, which is why we crave people who keep us guessing. The system was designed to make you pay attention to what doesn't fit the pattern, to keep learning, but attraction hijacks that system completely. You start checking, waiting, interpreting silences, all because your brain is chasing the dopamine hit that comes from being surprised by someone's care. The loop feeds itself. Less predictability means more checking, which means more gaps to fill with hope. Understanding this doesn't make the craving vanish, but it does let you see the machinery underneath the feeling. And sometimes that's enough to choose differently. Dopamine of the chase. Think about the last time someone took 3 hours to text you back after saying they would. Not a natural delay, but a deliberate one. Something in you woke up. Maybe you checked your phone twice as often. Maybe you replayed the last conversation, looking for clues. The waiting itself became the drug. Your brain does not get excited by what it already has. It gets excited by the possibility of what it might get, the gap between where you are and where you could be. This is dopamine's favorite currency, and it is called uncertainty. A predictable text every morning at 8 a.m. feels like background noise after 2 weeks. A text that arrives randomly, sometimes within minutes, sometimes after hours, keeps you in a state of productive vigilance. This is why the chase feels more alive than the catch, why the flirting phase is so intoxicating. Every interaction is a puzzle, every response unpredictable, every moment loaded with potential. Once someone is reliably yours, the uncertainty collapses. The dopamine stops spiking because your brain already knows the ending. You are not being rejected by the person, you are being bored by the certainty. And here is where most people get stuck. They mistake the fading dopamine for a sign that the spark is gone, that they need someone new. But dopamine is not a measure of love or connection. It is a measure of novelty. The person lying next to you could be infinitely interesting if you stopped believing you already knew them, if you stayed curious instead of certain. The small moves are not grand. Ask a question you have never asked, admit something you have never said, stay a little less predictable. You are not trying to resurrect a dead thing. You're trying to remember that curiosity and certainty cannot exist in the same room. Oxytocin, pair bonding hormone. You've probably heard oxytocin called the love hormone, which is half true and half dangerous oversimplification. Here's what's actually happening. When you're with someone you're attracted to, especially in those early weeks when everything feels magnetic, your body floods with oxytocin. It binds to receptors in your brain and makes that person feel like home, like the only one who matters, like they understand you in a way no one else could. The problem is, oxytocin doesn't actually know the difference between a real connection and a temporary high. Your brain releases it the same way, whether you're with your soulmate or someone who's just very good at making you feel seen for an evening. It's a chemical cement that hardens around whoever is triggering it, and it feels so real that your mind decides the cement must mean something profound. You start noticing only the things that confirm the bond. A bad joke seems endearing. A thoughtless comment becomes, "They were just tired." The oxytocin does the work of making you believe. And here's where it gets sticky, because the hormone creates genuine feelings of trust and closeness. You can't actually tell from the inside whether you're bonding with someone healthy or someone who's simply skilled at triggering your oxytocin response. People with poor intentions can activate the same neurochemistry as people with good ones. The tricky part is that the hormone doesn't discriminate between healthy and manipulative behavior. It just locks you in regardless. The real move isn't to distrust the oxytocin itself. It's to become a bit suspicious of how quickly it arrives, and to build actual trust slowly enough that the person's behavior has time to reveal itself before the chemistry gets too loud. Oxytocin accelerates bonding. It doesn't guarantee you're bonding with the right person. That distinction matters more than most people think. Vasopressin and monogamy. A prairie vole is not romantic because it chooses to be. It's romantic because a single hormone, vasopressin, floods its brain after sex, gluing it to its partner in a way that feels less like falling in love and more like magnetic north suddenly shifting. The vole doesn't contemplate commitment. It becomes committed. The neurobiology moves first. Intention follows. You might think humans are too complex for that kind of chemistry to matter, but here's what the research keeps suggesting. We are not actually that different. Vasopressin, along with its partner oxytocin, creates the neural soil where attachment grows. When these hormones are active, your brain literally changes how it weights the world. Your partner's face becomes more rewarding. Their voice carries more meaning. Time with them feels nutritious in a way nothing else does. The sticky part is that vasopressin doesn't care about intention or compatibility or whether you're making a good choice. It just cares about repetition and physical intimacy. This means two people can find themselves deeply bonded to someone not because they matched on a list, but because their bodies wired them together through consistent touch and presence. You can wake up 5 years in and realize you're attached to someone in a way that feels mysterious, even to yourself, because the attachment happened at a chemical level beneath the story you were telling about the relationship. The thing that keeps people returning to the same partner, sometimes even when they know it's not good for them, isn't always love or logic. Sometimes it's just that vasopressin has rewritten their reward system. Understanding this doesn't make you less romantic. It makes you more honest about what attachment actually is, a neurochemical fact that can feel like destiny, even when it's just biology doing what it evolved to do. Limerent's obsessive infatuation. You know that feeling when you text someone and delete it 4 times before sending? When you replay a 2-second laugh they made 3 days ago and it plays on loop in your head like a song you can't unhear? That's not love yet. That's limerence. And it's a whole different animal. One that psychologist Dorothy Tenoff named back in the 70s because regular words weren't strange enough to describe what actually happens in your brain. Limerence is obsessive, involuntary, and it lives in the gap between who someone is and who you've decided they are. You're not attracted to them. You're attracted to the version of them your mind constructed, the one where every small gesture means something cosmic. They remember your coffee order and suddenly they love you. They take 2 hours to text back and suddenly you're rewriting the entire relationship in your head, building escape routes and apologies and grand gestures that might prove your worth. The trap is this: limerence feels exactly like love while it's happening. Your chest tightens, time bends. They become the reason you check your phone obsessively, the reason you can't focus, the reason a neutral text feels like rejection. But here's the thing nobody tells you: limerence has a shelf life. It burns itself out, usually between a few months and a few years, unless real intimacy actually builds underneath it. If it doesn't, you crash hard. The quiet reframe: when you catch yourself obsessing over someone, ask what you actually know versus what you've imagined. Not to kill the feeling, but to see it clearly. Because limerence isn't bad, it's just not the same as choosing someone. And there's a world of difference between being obsessed with who you think they are and actually loving who they are. Idealization of the beloved. You know that moment when you first meet someone and suddenly all your friends start hearing about how brilliant they are, how their laugh is different from anyone else's, how they have this rare way of understanding you that nobody else could possibly have. What you are experiencing is not memory or observation. It's selective editing that your brain does without asking permission. Your mind collects the moments that fit a story and quietly files away everything else: the boring parts, the contradictions, the times they didn't text back or said something unkind that you immediately reframed as them being tired or stressed. Idealization is what happens when attraction meets narrative, when you unconsciously decide this person is the exception to human messiness. And here's where it gets tender and dangerous at once. This isn't lying to yourself exactly. You are genuinely noticing real things about them. The problem is you are noticing them in isolation, like looking at their life through a filter that only shows the gold. Their ambition looks like drive. Their defensiveness looks like depth. Their unavailability becomes proof they are valuable and sought after. What makes idealization so sticky is that it feels like love, because it includes real care and vulnerability. But it is built on an image, not a person. When the actual human being inevitably emerges from behind the curtain, tired and confused and inconsistent, and wanting different things than you thought, the disillusionment doesn't feel like loss of illusion. It feels like betrayal, like they changed, like they lied. The quiet work is to stay curious about who they actually are while you still like them, to let the real person stay bigger and more interesting than the story, to notice when you are editing and gently ask yourself what you are leaving out of the picture. Frustration, attraction, paradox. There's a moment in most relationships where someone pulls away and suddenly becomes magnetic. You can feel it happen. They're less available, less eager to text back, and for some reason, you find yourself thinking about them more. Your chest tightens. You replay conversations. You wonder what shifted. When someone is easy to reach, easy to predict, easy to have, your brain sorts them into the comfortable and safe file. But the moment there's friction, when you can't quite get them, when you're unsure how they feel, when the next interaction feels uncertain, your nervous system treats that as a problem worth solving. It floods you with dopamine and focus. Suddenly, they're a puzzle. Suddenly, they matter more. The cruelest part is that this feeling often masquerades as love deepening, when really it's something much simpler: frustration rewiring your attention. Some people are most attractive to us precisely when they're withholding. A half-hearted text becomes a small victory. A plan they almost cancel feels like a reprieve. You're not falling deeper in love. You're experiencing the neurochemistry of pursuit. And if both people are caught in this loop, one pulling away, the other chasing harder, both feeling like the other one's distance is proof of connection, you've got a relationship built on frustration masquerading as passion. The lesson isn't to manufacture distance or play games. It's to notice when you're confusing the effort of getting someone with the value of having them. Real attraction can absolutely coexist with ease. The steadiness doesn't mean they don't matter. Sometimes the person who's genuinely glad to hear from you, who shows up without games, is more loyal and more worth your energy than the one who keeps you guessing. Listen for that difference. Feel it in your body when someone makes space for you without hesitation. That steadiness is its own kind of magnetic, the kind that doesn't cost you sleep. Novelty and desire renewal. There's a couple in their 4th year together, and one night the woman suggests they take separate vacations. Her partner feels a spike of panic. Isn't that what people do when they're leaving? But something odd happens when they return. The spark that had been quietly dimming suddenly reignites. They want to hear everything. They notice each other again. Nothing about their relationship changed except the pattern of sameness broke for a moment. That break was fuel. Neuroscience tells us that desire doesn't fade from closeness. It fades from predictability. Your brain stops releasing dopamine when it already knows what's coming. A kiss goodbye on Tuesday tastes different than the 100th kiss goodbye on Tuesday. The novelty isn't in the person, it's in the friction between expectation and surprise. This doesn't mean you need to leave your partner to stay attracted. It means you have to be willing to interrupt the groove, try something neither of you has done together, change the room where you're intimate, ask a question you've never asked, take a different route to a place you've been 100 times, move your furniture, learn something new, and tell them about it. These small disturbances matter because they force your brain to pay attention again. When attention comes back, desire often follows. The tricky part is that lasting relationships require both safety and surprise, and they feel like opposites, but they're not. Safety without novelty becomes a slow fade into roommate status. Novelty without safety becomes exhausting theater. What actually keeps attraction alive is the willingness to be a little unknown to each other, even after years, not through manipulation or distance, but through genuine growth, playfulness, and the courage to say, I'm changing too. Keep up with me. That tension between the familiar and the fresh is where attraction lives longest. Coolidge effect variety drive. There's a reason the most attentive partner in a relationship is often the one who just showed up, not the one who's been there for years. Novelty does something to your nervous system that familiarity cannot, no matter how much you love someone. This isn't about being shallow or restless. It's wired into your reward circuitry, so ancient it predates language. The Coolidge effect, named for a crude old joke about President Coolidge, describes a pattern where a male animal loses sexual interest in a familiar partner but regains intense interest when a new partner appears. The moment the new partner is familiar again, interest drops. Repeat. This isn't just animals. Your brain craves variety in ways that feel like preference, but are actually chemistry. What makes this tricky in real relationships is that the novelty response is automatic. You don't choose it, and you can't reason it away by reminding yourself how much you care. A long-term partner becomes the map you know so well you stop looking at it. You can predict their reactions, their touch, their rhythm. Your dopamine system, which lights up at surprise and discovery, goes quiet. It's not that the person changed, it's that your brain stopped finding them surprising. And here's where many people stumble. They interpret the dip in novelty-driven excitement as a sign the relationship is dying, when it's actually just your nervous system asking for something different. The sustainable move isn't chasing new people. It's creating small unfamiliarity with the person you're already with. Unpredictability, a new setting, a conversation that goes somewhere neither of you expected. These aren't tricks, they're reality checks. You're fighting against your own wiring, sure, but you're also remembering that attraction is partly a choice about where you point your attention. Passion decay over time. There's a moment in most relationships, maybe 6 months in, maybe 2 years, when you notice the electricity doesn't jolt you the same way. Your person walks in the room, and instead of that catch in your chest, you just feel comfortable. You love them still, maybe more, but the neurochemistry that made you feel almost dangerous has quietly packed its bags. This isn't failure. It's biology doing exactly what it's built to do. When you first meet someone, your dopamine system floods like a match struck in darkness. Everything about them is novel. The way they laugh, their smell, the shape of their hands. Your brain treats them like a drug because neurologically they are one. But brains adapt. After repeated exposure, even heroin loses its novelty effect, and the same neurotransmitter cascade that lit you on fire begins to settle into baseline. The new becomes familiar, and familiar doesn't trigger the same electrical storm. Here's where most people derail. They mistake this chemical decline for emotional decline, thinking they're falling out of love when really they're shifting into a different phase entirely. Some spend their whole lives chasing that early passion, swapping partners whenever the dopamine dips, never settling into the quieter, deeper connection that grows underneath when you stop running. Others manufacture drama, fights, infidelity, obsessive checking because chaos produces a neurochemical spike that feels like proof the relationship still matters. But couples who last understand that passion doesn't vanish, it transforms. The intensity becomes reliability. The obsession becomes presence. What made your hands shake becomes what lets you sleep. When that familiar flatness creeps in, and it will, don't panic. Your nervous system is settling into safety, not your heart losing interest. The dopamine calms, but the real thing, the attachment underneath, stays awake and alert. Companionate love transition. There's a moment in most long relationships when you stop reaching for your partner's hand without thinking, and instead, you find yourself reaching because you've noticed they're there. The electricity doesn't vanish, it just changes shape, and if you don't recognize that shape, you mistake it for disappearance. That shift is companionate love, and it doesn't mean passion died. It means passion learned to sit still. Early love burns because it's novelty and uncertainty mixed together, a constant small crisis of, will they want me tomorrow? Your nervous system stays primed, your pupils dilate, you remember every word they said, but around year 2, year 5, maybe year 10, the uncertainty dissolves. You know they want to be there, you know their laugh, you know the small rituals, how they take coffee, the way they sigh when they're tired, the specific way they say your name when something matters, and something inside you relaxes. That relaxation can feel like loss if you haven't named it. You might find yourself wondering if you've fallen out of love, when really you've fallen into a different kind of love entirely, one that's quieter, steadier, less about fireworks, and more about the warmth of someone simply being there every morning. The trick is noticing that companionate love isn't less. It's more expensive to maintain because it requires attention without the automatic fuel of novelty. You have to choose it again, consciously, because your body isn't screaming urgent anymore. That's when you learn whether you actually like this person or if you were just addicted to the chase. The couples who survive this transition are the ones who stop waiting for passion to knock on the door and start noticing it in the small, steady glow that's been warming the house all along. Sternberg triangular love model. You've probably felt it. That moment early in a relationship when someone's text lights up your phone and your chest does that dumb flip, but you barely know their last name. Or the opposite. You wake up next to someone after a decade and the butterflies are gone, but so is the panic when they're not beside you. Psychologist Robert Sternberg noticed that love isn't one feeling. It's actually three separate things, and they don't always show up together or stay the same way. He called them passion, intimacy, and commitment. Passion is that visceral pull, the dopamine hit, the wanting to rip clothes off energy that makes you feel electric. Intimacy is knowing someone so deeply that a shared glance across a room means everything. Safety, being seen, the quiet ease when you don't have to perform. Commitment is the decision, the showing up anyway, the daily choice to stay even when the other two fade. The trick is that these three move independently through time. You can have passion and commitment without intimacy. That's infatuation mixed with obligation, which feels like quicksand, needing someone you don't actually know. You can have intimacy and commitment without passion, deep friendship wearing a marriage ring, which either becomes profound or quietly suffocating depending on what you both signed up for. You can have all three at once, and that's called consummate love, but it's rarer and harder to sustain than anyone tells you when you're young. Most of us think love is supposed to stay the same forever, locked in that early fever, but Sternberg's model says it actually shifts and transforms. Early on, passion often dominates. Long-term, intimacy and commitment are what hold it together. If you're feeling lost in your own relationship right now, stop blaming yourself for losing the spark. Ask instead, what's actually present, and is it something you both still want? Attachment style origins. Your nervous system remembers what your conscious mind has already forgotten. Those early moments when you needed something and either got it or didn't. Maybe your caregiver was there when you cried, warm and steady. Maybe the response came late, or came with conditions, or never came at all. That invisible blueprint from those first years doesn't evaporate into adulthood. It becomes the operating system you run when you're close to someone, even now, even with people who have nothing to do with that original person. Your attachment style is basically your nervous system's learned answer to one core question: are people safe? A child whose caregiver responded quickly and warmly learns yes. Their body settles when someone holds them. Years later, they can be alone without spiraling because they internalize that reassurance. They became secure. But a child who learned that comfort came sporadically, or only after a tantrum, or never at all, they built different wiring. Their attachment became anxious or avoidant or chaotic. They learned the world was unpredictable, so they either clung harder to prevent abandonment or pushed people away first to stay in control. The strange gift here is that these patterns aren't your fault, but they are entirely your responsibility now. You can't rewrite what happened in that little room, can't undo the years when safety felt conditional or distant, but you can start noticing the exact moment when your nervous system is running an old program with a new person. When you feel that desperate clench of they might leave, or that urge to shut down and go numb, that's not love. That's a template your body learned to survive. Templates can shift slowly, quietly, if you're willing to see them clearly and let someone trustworthy show you something different. That's wiring, rewiring itself, one consistent moment at a time. Secure base attraction. There's a person in your life who you can text at 3 in the morning with a weird fear or a stupid question, and you already know they won't make you feel small for it. That feeling, that steady sense that someone has your back even when you're messy, that's what we're calling a secure base. And here's what most people don't realize. You are magnetically drawn to people who make you feel like one. Not because they're perfect, but because they're steady. The kind of person who doesn't vanish when things get real, who shows up the same way on Tuesday as they do on Saturday, who you could disappoint and they'd still think you're worthwhile. There's actual neuroscience behind this. When you're with someone who feels like a secure base, your nervous system literally quiets down. Your cortisol drops. Your body knows it's safe to relax. That's not poetry, that's biochemistry. And your brain remembers that feeling. It starts looking for it in other people. It starts wanting to be it for them too. Here's the paradox. We chase excitement, drama, uncertainty, all those nervous system on fire feelings. But the person we actually stay with is the one who makes us feel held, the one where attraction deepens precisely because nothing has to prove itself. You can just exist. The brain recognizes safety as currency more valuable than novelty, and once it finds that signal, it won't forget. So if you're wondering why you're drawn to someone who seems boring on paper, or why a relationship shifted the moment someone proved they could stick around through hard things, you're not broken. You're recognizing what your body has always known. Security is the deepest form of attraction, the one that lasts because it costs nothing to sustain and everything to lose. Anxious, preoccupied pursuit. You know that feeling when you send a message and then immediately start watching for the typing bubble, refreshing the screen every few seconds, wondering if you said something wrong, if they're annoyed, if they've lost interest. That's anxious, preoccupied attachment in motion, and it runs deeper than just impatience. When you're preoccupied with pursuit, your nervous system is treating uncertainty like a threat. Your brain can't rest until the other person confirms they still like you, still see you, still exist in the context of you, so you pursue. You text again. You find reasons to reach out. You manufacture closeness because the gap between you and them feels unbearable, not because they've done anything wrong, but because your internal alarm is ringing and you need it to stop. The trap is that this pursuit often backfires. People with secure attachment styles feel smothered by constant contact. They need space to miss you, to lean in of their own volition. But when you're anxious, space feels identical to abandonment, so you close the gap again. You've created a cycle. Their withdrawal triggers your pursuit, which triggers their withdrawal further. Now you're both stuck in a dance where nobody feels good. What makes this sticky is that in the moment, pursuing feels like the only solution available to you. You're not trying to be suffocating. You're trying to soothe the real anxiety vibrating through your chest, the genuine discomfort of not knowing. The painful truth is that the thing quieting your anxiety in the short term is often the exact thing destroying the connection in the long term. The slow move that actually changes the pattern is learning to self-soothe that ache without using the other person as the bandage. That's where the real freedom lives, not in the pursuit, but in the pause. Avoidant deactivating strategies. Someone you care about reaches out after days of silence, and instead of relief, you feel a small surge of irritation. They text you something sweet, and you find yourself scrolling past it, or worse, finding reasons why it was annoying. Your nervous system is working hard to keep distance from what feels unsafe about closeness, and you might not even recognize it's happening. That's deactivation at work, and it runs quieter than most defenses because it doesn't look like fear. When intimacy starts to feel too close, too vulnerable, or too likely to end in abandonment, the avoidant mind deploys a toolkit. Criticism of your partner. Suddenly, their laugh is annoying. Their dreams seem unrealistic. Emotional withdrawal, you become harder to reach, or preoccupation with independence and self-sufficiency, a subtle way of saying, I don't need you. Sometimes it's nitpicking, sometimes it's picking a fight for no reason your conscious mind can even articulate. The trap is that these strategies work in the short term. The discomfort eases, the closeness pulls back, relief floods in, but what feels like safety is actually a slow exit from the relationship while you're still physically there and your partner is left confused, blamed, or quietly heartbroken, watching someone they love drift into coldness. The real cost hides in plain sight. You get to avoid the fear of abandonment, but you also guarantee it. If you recognize this pattern in yourself, the move isn't to shame the defense because it kept you safe once, maybe many times over. The move is to notice when the urge to create distance comes and ask what you're actually protecting yourself from. Is it real danger in this moment or an old fear dressed up as a present-day threat? That question alone can create enough space to choose differently, even if choosing closeness still feels terrifying. Anxious, avoidant trap dynamic. You know that feeling when someone pulls away and your first instinct is to move closer? That's the stage where this dynamic begins. In the space between two people reaching in completely opposite directions. One person's anxiety, that hunger for reassurance and closeness and contact, meets another person's avoidance, that legitimate need for space and breathing room, and instead of balancing out, they amplify each other into a painful loop that neither person actually designed or chose. The anxious partner texts more because they feel rejected. The avoidant partner disappears further because they feel suffocated. Each move becomes the other's evidence. The anxious person thinks, see, they don't want me. The avoidant person thinks, exactly why I need space. And around they go like a record stuck in one groove. What makes this so hard to escape is that both people feel fundamentally right. The anxious person isn't making things up. They do need reassurance and presence. Those are real needs. The avoidant person isn't being difficult on purpose. They do need autonomy. That's survival too. But when these two nervous systems meet without awareness, without someone naming what's actually happening, they become each other's proof that something is broken about the relationship, rather than two people learning a different dance together. The real trap isn't the attachment styles themselves. It's that most couples can't see the pattern. Usually, the anxious one gets labeled needy or clingy when really they're both expressing opposite survival strategies, both trying to feel safe in different ways. If you're noticing this dynamic, try naming it out loud together. When I move close, you pull back. When you pull back, I chase harder. Can we see that together? Awareness of the pattern itself often loosens its grip faster than trying to change your attachment style alone. Fearful, disorganized ambivalence. You know that person who texts you 3 times in a row, then vanishes for a week, or who leans in close during dinner, then suddenly pulls away and checks their phone obsessively. That jagged rhythm, drawn in, pushed back, drawn in again, is the signature of fearful, disorganized attachment, and it roots itself early, usually in childhoods where the caregiver was both the source of comfort and the source of fear. Maybe a parent who was warm when happy and cold when angry, with no way to predict which version would show up. The child learns, Closeness is dangerous, but loneliness is unbearable, and there's no safe middle ground. In attraction, this shows up as a specific kind of chaos. Someone with fearful attachment wants intimacy desperately. They crave being held, known, chosen, but the moment they feel that happening, anxiety floods in. What if they're hurt? What if they're abandoned? So they self-sabotage. They create distance, test you, get snappy, then panic when you actually back away. They're not trying to be difficult. They're caught in a loop where their nervous system treats closeness like a threat that needs to be managed through rejection before it can reject them first. The tricky part is that fearful attachment looks different from avoidant or anxious alone. It's the combination, the whiplash. Someone can be clingy one day and emotionally cold the next. They might have intense attraction that crashes into distrust. They ruminate about whether they're worthy of love while simultaneously pushing away the person offering it. If you recognize this in someone you're attracted to or in yourself, the shift isn't about perfect consistency. It's about building a nervous system that learns. This person stays. Repeated small moments of being shown up for, not abandoned when frightened, can slowly rewire that ancient expectation that love and danger arrive together. Working models of intimacy. Think about the person you felt safest with as a child. Maybe it was a parent, a grandparent, or no one in particular. That person taught you something without saying it aloud. They taught you whether it was okay to need things, whether asking for help meant you'd be ridiculed or held, whether the world was a place where people showed up or disappeared when things got hard. That invisible lesson is your working model of intimacy, and it is still running your relationships now. A working model is not a philosophy you consciously choose. It is a blueprint your nervous system created from lived experience. If your person was consistent, you learned that vulnerability was safe, that closeness didn't require walls. If they were unpredictable, your body learned to stay half ready for abandonment, which makes real intimacy feel terrifying because it means letting someone close enough to hurt you. If they were cold or shaming, you may have learned that the safest intimacy was the kind you controlled, shallow enough to survive. Here's what matters. You tend to seek partners who confirm that model even when it hurts. Someone with an anxious model will sometimes chase an avoidant partner because the push-pull feels like home. It matches the early relationship they know. Someone with an avoidant model may choose partners who don't push too hard for closeness, which keeps the illusion of safety intact. The quiet reframe is this: your model is not truth. It is data from people who were doing their best with what they had. If you notice yourself repeating the same painful pattern, you are not broken. You are loyal to an old lesson. That loyalty can shift, but only if you start seeing the blueprint for what it is. Learned, not inevitable, and built from a time when you had fewer choices. And that shift, small as it sounds, changes everything about who you can let close. Attachment injury rupture. You said something small. Your partner heard something catastrophic. Maybe you were tired and snapped. Maybe you made a joke that landed wrong. Maybe you were busy when they needed you most. What matters is not what you did. It's what they decided it meant about you, about them, about whether you'd ever really be there. That decision, once planted, doesn't fade like a normal argument. It roots itself deep and changes how they see safety with you. That's an attachment injury, not the mistake itself, but the betrayal story they build on top of it. The real danger isn't that you hurt them, it's that in the moment of hurt, you became unreliable in a way that echoes backward and forward through time. Their nervous system now holds a file labeled, "I can't count on them when it counts." And here's what makes it stick with the grip of muscle memory. They'll test it, unconsciously, repeatedly, like a finger pressing on an old bruise to see if it still aches. They might pick smaller fights to see if you'll leave this time. They might withdraw affection to see if you chase. They might tell you how you failed, waiting for you to get defensive, because in their script, defensiveness proves you never really cared. The way out isn't apology alone. It's recognition woven into behavior. It's showing up differently in the small moments that echo the original one. If you were absent, be present now without being asked. If you made light of something serious, hold it as serious now. If you chose something else over them, let them see the reversal happen again and again. Trust after an attachment injury isn't rebuilt in conversations, it's rebuilt in patterns, in the body's slow learning that safety is real again. Protest behavior after distance. Someone you loved put space between you, whether it's a physical move, a slower text response, or just the feeling that they're pulling away. And something shifts. You don't become passive or accepting. You become louder. You text more. You show up more. You suddenly remember all the little things you used to do that made them smile, and you do them again harder. This is protest behavior, and it's happening in your chest right now if you've ever felt that spike of desperate activity when distance started. Protest is not a choice you made consciously. It's a mammalian alarm system that fires when attachment bonds feel threatened. Think of it like this. If a baby's caregiver steps away, the baby doesn't go quiet and patient. The baby cries. The baby reaches. The baby escalates because escalation has always worked before. It brought the person back. Somewhere in your nervous system, you are still that baby. When distance happens, your system runs the ancient protocol. Try harder, be more, prove it matters. The trap is that protest often feels like it's working in the moment. You get a text back, they call, they say they care, so you repeat the behavior and it becomes a groove. But here's what most people miss. Protest behavior often speeds up the very distance you're trying to close. The other person experiences your intensity as pressure, not love. They step back further. You protest harder. The cycle gets tighter. The next time you feel that urge to reach, to text, to remind them you exist, pause and ask yourself what you're actually trying to prove. Are you trying to bring them closer, or are you trying to make the anxiety go away? That difference changes everything. Self-expansion through partner. There's a reason people often glow after falling in love, and it has nothing to do with better lighting or a new skincare routine. When you're drawn to someone, you don't just gain a partner, you gain access to their entire world. Their hobbies become yours to explore, their friends, their stories, their way of seeing things. Suddenly, you're not just living your life, you're living a bigger one. Psychologists call this self-expansion, and it's one of the quieter pulls that keeps attraction alive long after the first kiss fades. You feel more, you become more, at least in your own mind, and your brain remembers that feeling. Here's the catch that nobody talks about. This expansion is what your brain is actually tracking when it decides someone is attractive. Not just their face or their body, it's the sense that being around them multiplies you. You walk into a room with them and you're funnier because their presence loosens you. You try something new because they believe you can. You know more about wine or art or what makes people tick because they cared enough to teach you. That growth tastes like love, even when it's just novelty wearing a familiar name. The trap, though, is thinking the person caused the expansion. They didn't, you did, with them as the scaffold. And when people treat their partner like a permanent source of self-growth instead of a collaborator in it, something hardens. The attraction flips to pressure. You start resenting them for not expanding you enough, for not being enough, when really you've stopped expanding yourself. The antidote isn't finding someone bigger, it's remembering that the glow comes from the growth, not from them. Stay curious on your own, stay restless, then watch what happens to how you see them. Michelangelo's sculpting effect. Michelangelo said the sculpture was already in the marble. He was just removing what didn't belong. Apply that to attraction, and you start seeing something almost creepy in how it works. When you're drawn to someone, your brain isn't building them from scratch. It's carving away everything that isn't the version of them you need them to be. The gaps between who they actually are and who you've decided they are, those become the real estate where obsession lives. You notice the way they laugh at your jokes and forget the 3 times they didn't listen. You see their ambition and smooth over the selfishness. You catch one moment of tenderness and let it overwrite a whole pattern of emotional distance. This isn't love yet, it's sculpting. And here's where it gets sticky. The more you invest in removing the marble, the more attached you become to the masterpiece you're creating, not the person you're standing next to. They start to feel irreplaceable because your version of them is irreplaceable, but the real person is still in there somewhere, trapped between who they are and who your attention has decided they should be. The danger isn't attraction itself, it's mistaking your own artistry for discovery. You think you're seeing them clearly when you're actually projecting with surgical precision. And when reality finally chips through, when they say something that doesn't fit the sculpture, when they reveal a flaw you can't chisel away, the collapse feels like betrayal. It's not. It's just the marble talking back. Here's the thing that matters most. What are you not seeing about this person? What marble are you still removing? Sometimes the most important question isn't what you're attracted to. It's what you're deliberately ignoring so the picture stays beautiful. Reciprocal self-disclosure. You tell someone you're nervous about something and they pause, then tell you they're nervous too. The air shifts. Suddenly, you're not the only one carrying weight. You've both got skin in the game now. That's reciprocal self-disclosure, though the name undersells what it actually feels like. When you reveal something real, especially something vulnerable, there's a strange pull in the other person to match that honesty. It feels like a rhythm rather than a transaction, like you've both decided to play by the same rules. You go deep, they feel permission to go deep. You mention a fear, they mention theirs. Before long, you've both sketched the shape of who you actually are, not the polished version that shows up in normal conversation. The speed matters, though. Too much vulnerability too early, and you look unhinged or attention-seeking, but reciprocity is the safeguard. If you share something real at a natural moment, the other person almost always moves toward you. Their version of meeting you might be smaller or larger than yours, but they will move. Psychologists have found that when attraction is forming, reciprocal disclosure is one of the strongest signals that someone wants to keep talking to you, wants to know more. It's the opposite of surface chat. It's a quiet agreement that yes, we are willing to see each other. The paradox sits right here. If you want someone to open up, the fastest path isn't asking clever questions or being mysteriously intriguing. It's you going first in a way that feels genuine and earned. Give them something real, something that costs you a little to say. Watch what comes back. That answer tells you everything about whether they're ready to move closer or keeping careful distance. The people worth knowing are almost always the ones who meet your honesty with their own. Fast friends escalating questions. Sit across from someone you've just met and watch the questions start soft. Where are you from? What do you do? Then something shifts when they ask why that place shaped you or what failure taught you, and suddenly the safety rail comes off. You're not making small talk anymore, you're confessing. That's the skeleton of the Fast Friends Protocol, a psychological hack that collapses distance between strangers in 90 minutes. And it works because vulnerability is contagious and escalation is the vector. The trick isn't the questions themselves. Anyone can ask deep ones. It's the rhythm and permission structure built into each round. You start low stakes, favorite holiday memory, first pet, someone you admire, and why. Each round gets warmer, more revealing, more you. By round 3, you're not talking about fear of failure in the abstract or imposter syndrome as a concept. You're naming the moment someone told you you'd never make it, how it still lives in your chest on bad days. What makes this effective is that vulnerability begets vulnerability. It's not rational, it's ancient wiring. When someone trusts you with something real, your brain registers it as a signal you can trust them back. Your mind thinks, if they're willing to crack open like that, maybe this is safe. Maybe I can too. The catch is authenticity and timing. Rush it, and it feels like someone's running a playbook on you, like you're being manipulated. But when it's genuine, when someone asks the next level question because they actually want to know rather than follow a script, something shifts. You leave feeling less alone than you walked in. Here's what matters. Real connection doesn't require cleverness or charm. It requires the bravery to ask the slightly uncomfortable question and then sit still while they answer. That single choice to go one layer deeper can turn a stranger into someone you actually recognize. Vulnerability as intimacy accelerant. There's a moment, usually around 2 in the morning, when someone tells you something they've never said out loud before, and you feel the shift. Not because the secret is shocking, because they chose you to be the one who knows. That choice is what does it. Vulnerability isn't weakness broadcasting into the void. It's a calculated risk, a door someone opens only when they believe you won't slam it shut or run straight to the next person. When you witness that, something rewires between you. You're no longer a stranger or even a casual friend. You're someone they decided to trust when they had something to lose. The science backs this up, but the real magic is in the feeling. Brené Brown calls it daring greatly, but here's what that actually means in practice. The person who admits they're scared of abandonment, or that they don't feel smart enough, or that they want you more than they want to seem cool, they're handing you proof that they value you over their armor, and if you respond by doing the same, you've just created a feedback loop of reciprocal honesty. You're no longer performing. You're both just there, real and unfiltered. The trap is thinking vulnerability means dumping everything on someone immediately. It doesn't. Real intimacy builds when risk is proportional. You match their openness, not exceed it. You earn the right to be trusted by respecting what they've shared, by not weaponizing it later, by showing up the same way. So the next time someone tells you something small but true about themselves, pause. They're not just making conversation, they're testing whether you're someone worth revealing to. That's an invitation, not a burden. The way you hold it determines if intimacy happens or if they lock the door again. Matching hypothesis of desirability. There's a strange moment in dating when you realize you're not chasing someone because they're perfect. You're chasing them because the odds feel fair. You walk into a room and spot someone objectively more attractive than you. Your gut whispers that it won't work and you don't even bother. But then you notice someone in your league, similar looks, similar status, similar humor, and suddenly you feel like you have a shot. That's not romance playing out. That's math. The matching hypothesis says we unconsciously pair ourselves with people of equivalent desirability, not because we're unambitious, but because we're loss averse. A rejection from someone far above us stings less than one from someone we thought we could actually land. So we're drawn to mirrors. You find someone who's roughly as attractive, successful, funny, or kind as you perceive yourself to be, and the risk feels manageable. The chances of them saying yes feel real. What makes this sticky is that we lie about why we choose who we choose. You tell your friends you love their personality, and maybe that's true, but if you're honest in a quiet moment, there was a calculation underneath. You evaluated where you stand in the social marketplace and bid accordingly. It's not cynical, it's survival logic baked into attraction itself. The tricky part is that this can lock you into a certain tier of experience. If you underestimate yourself, you'll only pursue people in your imagined league, and you'll never find out what was actually possible. If you overestimate yourself, you'll face more rejections than necessary. The real move isn't to aim higher recklessly. It's to actually know yourself, not the story you tell, but what you genuinely bring. Then match accordingly, but leave some room for surprise. Similarity attraction principle. You've probably noticed it without naming it. The moment someone shares a specific anxiety with you and suddenly they feel like home, not because they're perfect, but because they're worried about the same things. A friend who also overthinks late at night, who also feels out of place at parties, who also checks their phone obsessively. The shared strangeness becomes a quiet signal. You're not alone in this particular way of being broken. That signal is magnetic, and it works even when the person across from you is someone you just met. Neuroscience backs this up. Our brains don't just tolerate similarity, they reward it. When someone shares your values, your humor, your habits, your fears, your brain releases dopamine. It's not romantic fantasy at that point. It's chemistry meeting recognition. The trap is thinking similarity is always about big things, politics or religion or life goals. Sometimes the glue is smaller and stickier. You both hate small talk. You both eat the same weird breakfast. You both get defensive the same way. You both laugh at the same stupid timing. These tiny mirrors create a sense of being seen. And being seen is one of the oldest attraction accelerators we have. The danger shows up when similarity becomes a substitute for actual compatibility. Two people can be similar in temperament, but incompatible in how they handle conflict. They can share the same anxiety and still trigger each other. So pay attention to which similarities actually feel good versus which ones just feel safe. Sometimes what feels like recognition is just your brain relaxing into a familiar pattern, which isn't bad, but it's worth knowing the difference. The real alchemy happens when you find someone similar enough to feel known, but different enough to keep growing. Complementarity myth debunked. You've heard it 1,000 times. Opposites attract. The introvert needs the extrovert. The planner needs the spontaneous one. The detail person needs the big picture dreamer. It sounds poetic, like the universe hands you exactly what you lack. The problem is, it's mostly wrong, and believing it can actually sink attraction before it even starts. When researchers actually track real couples over time, they find the opposite pattern. Similarity predicts staying together. Not just similarity in values or life goals, though those matter too. I mean, similarity in how you approach the world, how fast you make decisions, how much noise you can tolerate, whether silence feels comfortable or anxious. The couples that last share what psychologists call regulatory styles. Basically, they calm down the same way and get wound up by the same things. A highly social person paired with someone who genuinely needs 6 hours of alone time each week, that's not romantic balance. That's a slow friction that builds resentment every weekend. The introvert feels drained from constant social obligation. The extrovert feels rejected and lonely. Both blame themselves for not being enough. Now, here's the trap. Sometimes early attraction does feel like complementarity. You meet someone whose energy fills a gap you didn't know you had. You feel more alive. That's intoxicating. But that's novelty and chemistry talking, not long-term compatibility. 6 months in, when the novelty fades, you're left living with someone whose basic rhythm conflicts with yours. The stickier truth is this: you don't need someone opposite. You need someone whose normal is close enough to yours that living together feels like coming home, not constant negotiation. The real currency of lasting attraction isn't how much someone completes you. It's how little they exhaust you. Similarity feels boring until you realize boring is actually peace. Authoritative mating patterns. You know that moment when you realize your partner's taste in music, education level, or even their neuroses look suspiciously similar to yours. That is not accident or destiny. That is authoritative mating, the quiet force that draws like to like. People do not mate randomly. We gravitate toward partners who share our intelligence, income bracket, values, maybe even our anxiety levels. It happens so naturally you barely notice it until someone points it out. Then suddenly you see it everywhere. Couples who finish each other's sentences because they genuinely process the world the same way, or pairs bonded over shared weirdness that would confuse anyone else. The mechanism is surprisingly simple. You meet people in environments that already filter for similarity: college, professional circles, hobbies, neighborhoods. You are attracted to what feels familiar, what does not require translation. Someone with your education understands your career stress without explanation. Someone with your background gets your family dynamics. That ease of understanding feels like love, and often it becomes love, but it starts as recognition. The long-term effect matters more than it seems. When people partner with those increasingly similar to themselves, it amplifies inequality across generations. Your kid inherits not just your genes, but your parents' income, connections, and worldview all bundled together. Societies become more stratified through millions of micro-choices that feel entirely personal. The stranger part. Authoritative mating is not about finding your perfect match. It is about finding someone whose flaws you can live alongside because they are familiar flaws, ones you recognize from your own life. So when you feel that pull towards someone who gets you, pause for just a moment and ask whether you are drawn to them because they expand your world or because they simply mirror it back. Social proof of desirability. You walk into a coffee shop and there's a person sitting alone reading. 15 minutes later, 2 others sit nearby, then a couple joins a table close by. Suddenly, the solitary reader looks more interesting. Not because they changed, but because your brain registered the crowd as a signal that something worth wanting is happening there. That's social proof, the invisible hand that tells you what matters by showing you where other people are looking. It works on attraction in ways so quiet you miss it while it's happening. When someone has a long string of exes, or friends describe them as always dating someone, or they're frequently seen with admirers in tow, a part of you assumes there must be something there worth desiring. You don't check their actual character or compatibility. The proof is in the lineup. Their desirability becomes real not because of who they are, but because of who has already wanted them. The mechanism is evolutionary. If many people are drawn to someone, the ancestral logic goes, there's probably good genes or status in the mix. But here's where it gets tangled. It works backward, too. If someone is alone, unchosen, rarely pursued, your brain automatically downgrades them, not because they're unworthy, but because the social proof is missing. For the person being watched and wanted, this creates a feedback loop. They get more attention, which makes them seem more valuable, which brings more attention. Meanwhile, someone equally interesting but less visible stays invisible. The real insight isn't that you're shallow for responding to social proof. It's that you're responding to a signal with nothing to do with actual desirability and everything to do with visibility, timing, and momentum. When you feel the pull towards someone because others have wanted them, pause and ask, is it them or is it the echo of everyone else's choice, pre-selection, and mate copying? Watch what happens the moment someone walks into a room and other people are already laughing with them, leaning in, asking their opinion. Suddenly, that person becomes more magnetic, not because they changed, but because you just watched other people vote for them. Your brain registers that vote instantly, and it shifts how attractive they seem. That's pre-selection, the quiet conviction that if others want someone, there must be something worth wanting. It's not cynical, it's pattern recognition that evolved to work. If 5 people thought that person was interesting before you did, the odds they're actually interesting went up. Evolution learned to trust that crowd signal, so it built it into your nervous system as a feeling, that warm pull of attraction towards someone already valued by others. The trap is that the feeling doesn't feel like logic, it feels like genuine desire. You don't think, I'm attracted because others are attracted. You just suddenly notice their eyes more, their laugh lands different. You feel like you discovered something real about them, when really you discovered something about how other people feel about them. This is why being wanted makes you more attractive, why the person who already has options seems to have more options, why the couple holding hands at the bar somehow seems more in love than the couple alone at the same bar. The attraction isn't fake, it's just borrowed from the field around them. What makes this invisible is that the pull feels personal, specific to them, when you're really responding to social proof absorbed in seconds. When you feel that draw towards someone everyone else wants, pause and ask whether you're drawn to them or drawn to being drawn to what others have claimed. The answer won't kill the feeling, but it might remind you that your own voltage still matters. Status and resource cues. A worn watch, a calm hand across the table, the way someone orders coffee without hesitation. Your nervous system isn't neutral about these things. It's scanning constantly for signals about whether someone can actually deliver on their promises, whether they can hold steady when things matter. Status and resources in the attraction calculus aren't really about greed or shallow vanity, though we tell ourselves that story when we feel bad about noticing them. They're about survival code that runs deeper than words. Someone with steady resources doesn't panic easily. Someone with real status has already won social conflicts, meaning they're less likely to drag you into chaos. And your brain knows this at a level beneath language, in your chest before your mind catches up. But here's where it gets interesting. The signal is far broader than money. It's competence. It's the ability to move through the world without flinching. A teacher with genuine mastery over their material, a parent who isn't frantic, a friend who shows up on time. These people emit status cues in their own orbit. They have real resources, attention, time, emotional bandwidth. Your nervous system feels this and relaxes slightly in their presence. The catch is that someone can flash false cues, a borrowed car, a rehearsed story, borrowed confidence that cracks the moment stakes rise, and you might feel drawn for 6 weeks before your body figures out the map doesn't match the territory. The way to catch this early is almost stupidly simple. Watch how someone behaves when nothing is on the line, when they lose, when the spotlight isn't on them, when their phone buzzes and they don't check it, or when they admit something they're bad at without spinning it into a lesson. Real status doesn't need an audience. It just breathes differently, and that difference is what your nervous system trusts most. Competence display attraction. There's a moment in almost every early courtship when you catch them doing something they're genuinely good at, and suddenly your chest does this small, quiet thing. They're focused. Their hands move with certainty. They're not trying to impress you. They've forgotten you're watching. That's not accidental. Your nervous system just registered something evolutionary, capability. Competence is attractive because it whispers a story your brain understands instantly. This person can handle things. They can solve problems. If life gets hard, they won't fall apart. But here's where it gets layered. You're not attracted to the skill itself. You're attracted to what the skill says about their mind. Someone who can build something, teach something, fix something, or lead something. They've practiced. They've failed and come back. They've faced resistance and didn't quit. That's not just confidence. That's the evidence of confidence. And that evidence lives deeper than charm. Charm fades in the 3rd year. Competence doesn't. The quiet trap is that we sometimes mistake arrogance for competence. Someone loudly announcing their skills, constantly name-dropping what they've done, needing you to know how impressive they are. That's the opposite of true competence. Real competence is quiet. It doesn't need validation because the results speak. A truly capable person rarely has to tell you they're capable. You see it when they move through a problem, when they make a decision, when they admit what they don't know. So if you're wondering why you felt that little spark with someone, trace it back. Was it a moment when they were absorbed in something hard, doing it well, doing it for its own sake? That's not shallow attraction. That's your deepest self recognizing someone who isn't going to crumble. And that recognition is something worth staying awake for, at least for a moment. Vulnerable narcissism allure. There's a person in most of our lives who seems almost fragile, sensitive to every perceived slight, quick to tell you how hard they've had it, hungry for reassurance, but somehow never quite satisfied by it. You find yourself drawn in anyway because they feel real in a way that's different from the loud, obvious narcissist. This is vulnerable narcissism, and it's magnetic precisely because it hides its hunger under a cloak of hurt. They're not bragging, they're confessing. And confession feels like intimacy. The trap is that vulnerable narcissists still need to be the center of your emotional universe, just through a different door. Where the grandiose narcissist demands admiration, the vulnerable one demands understanding, endless patience, constant evidence that you see how wounded they are. When you give it, you feel like a good person. When you pull back, they feel devastated, and suddenly you're the insensitive one. It's a slow drain because the narcissism is wrapped in self-pity rather than self-love, so you don't immediately recognize it as selfishness. You think you're helping. You think if you just understand them better, if you just show up more consistently, they'll stabilize. But the wound they're pointing to isn't really a problem to solve. It's a permanent justification for keeping you close and off balance. The quiet alarm is this. If someone consistently needs you to validate their suffering more than they celebrate your joy, if their pain always edges into the conversation about your good news, you're not in a relationship. You're in a role. The real shift happens when you notice yourself tiptoeing around their feelings, explaining yourself before you've even done anything wrong, or apologizing for things that aren't yours to apologize for. That's when you stop being their mirror and start being your own. Dark triad initial charm. You meet someone at a bar or a party, and they're magnetic in a way you can't quite name. They listen to you like you're the most interesting person alive, leaning in, remembering your name 3 times in one conversation, making eye contact that feels both rare and easy. They're confident without arrogance, funny in a way that lands perfectly, and somehow they've already made you laugh harder than anyone has in weeks. By the end of the night, you feel like they see you. That's not accident. People high in the dark triad traits, narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism, are often exceptionally skilled at what researchers call initial impression management. They've learned that charming people is a tool, and they use it with precision. The narcissist enjoys being admired. The psychopath is mimicking the emotional connection they're incapable of feeling. The Machiavellian is calculating whether you're useful. The mask is different for each, but the effect is nearly identical. You feel seen, pursued, special, and for a short window, that's probably genuine attraction, not deception. They really do focus on you. They really are that present. The trap arrives later, when the charm recalibrates once they've got your attention, once your utility has been measured, once the initial mirror they held up to you starts to distort. Early attraction isn't where the cost lives. It's in the moment when you're already attached and the person behind the charm becomes visible. That's when you realize the listening was transactional, the humor was designed to lower your guard, and the eye contact was a performance. The kindest thing you can do for yourself, notice who they are when they're not performing. Watch how they treat people who can't help them. That's the real tell, and it happens quietly, long before you fall. Confidence versus arrogance line. You ever notice how 2 people can walk into a room the exact same way? Shoulders back, eye contact steady, clear voice, and one feels magnetic while the other feels like they're performing for approval? The difference isn't posture. It's what they believe about the people around them. Confidence is the quiet belief that you are enough. Arrogance is the loud belief that everyone else is less. When you're confident, you can afford to be genuinely curious about another person because your worth isn't on trial. You ask real questions. You listen without planning your next brag. You can laugh at your own missteps because they don't threaten your foundation. Arrogance, by contrast, is a full-time job. Every interaction becomes a stage where you need to prove something. You're always performing, always subtly one-upping, always checking whether people are sufficiently impressed. It's exhausting to be around, and more importantly, it signals that the person is fragile underneath. Here's what makes this line so fine and so crucial. Confidence is magnetic because it gives other people permission to be themselves. They relax around you. But arrogance sucks the air out of the room because it says you need to earn the right to be here. The person across from you immediately feels smaller, either resentful or diminished. What trips people up is that arrogance often masquerades as confidence early on. It's louder, it takes up space, it can seduce you for a moment. But real confidence is patient. It can be quiet. It doesn't need constant validation because it's not dependent on your reaction. It doesn't advertise itself through boasts or subtle digs. So if you find yourself explaining why you're great, defending your worth, or subtly comparing yourself to others, pause. That's not confidence talking. That's fear in an expensive suit, and the people who matter know the difference. Nonchalance, signaling abundance. There's a moment in every interaction where someone leans in a little too hard and you feel it immediately, a tightness, a neediness that shifts the entire energy. Then there's the person who says the same thing but backwards, who seems genuinely unbothered whether you respond or not. You know which one you trust more. That difference isn't luck or natural talent. It's a signal your brain picks up on, and it's telling you something crucial about perceived scarcity versus abundance. When someone acts like they have all the time in the world for you, it implies they have other options, other people, other possibilities. They're not desperate. They're not running low on attention or romantic capital. That nonchalance, the ability to be present without clinging, to engage without performing, reads as abundance. Scarcity, meanwhile, shows up as over-texting, over-explaining, or trying too hard to be impressive. You can feel the hunger behind it. And here's what makes this psychologically sticky. Attraction isn't rational, so logic doesn't save you. When someone seems to have fewer options, your brain categorizes them as lower value, not because that's fair, but because in evolutionary terms, resources and mates that are hard to get genuinely were worth more. A person who seems like they could walk away is automatically more interesting than one who seems trapped. The trap is that faking nonchalance gets transparent fast. People smell desperation underneath performed indifference. Real abundance signal doesn't come from pretending you don't care about someone. It comes from genuinely having a full life, other relationships, interests, work that matters, so that this one connection, while meaningful, isn't your oxygen. It's the difference between wanting someone and needing them. One keeps you steady, the other makes you small. Neediness as repellent. You know that moment when someone texts you 3 times before you've answered once, and each message feels a little more urgent? Something shifts in you. Not anger exactly, but a small tightening, a sense that you're suddenly responsible for their emotional weather. What started as neutral interest becomes a low-grade obligation. An obligation is the death of attraction. Neediness isn't really about how much someone wants you. It's about the invisible weight they're asking you to carry. It's the demand hiding inside the vulnerability. When someone treats your response as proof of their worth, when your attention becomes their lifeline, they've made the relationship asymmetrical in a way that kills desire. You feel the burden before you feel the person. Attraction lives in mutual ease, the sense that both people are fundamentally okay, and choosing each other is a luxury, not a survival strategy. When that balance tips, when one person becomes the needy one and the other becomes the rescuer, the dynamic is broken. The rescuer resents the rescue. The needy person senses the resentment and clings harder. It spirals. The hard part is that neediness often masquerades as love. I care so much becomes I can't function without you. One is attractive. The other is exhausting. The shift happens in your nervous system. When someone is secure, you relax around them. When someone is desperate for your reassurance, you tense. That tension is what people feel when they pull away. It's not that they don't like you, it's that liking you has started to feel like work. The quiet move. If you catch yourself reaching out repeatedly or checking if they've responded, pause and ask what you're actually afraid of. Scarcity creates need. Scarcity makes you small. The moment you stop performing your own smallness for them is often when they notice you again. Investment imbalance detection. You notice your person has read your last 3 messages but hasn't typed back, yet they posted a story 20 minutes ago, small enough to miss if you're not paying attention. big enough that something shifts inside when you catch it. That shift, that moment of math happening in your body before your brain even finishes thinking, that's investment imbalance detection in real time. It's the part of you that keeps score without meaning to, watching who puts in and who pulls back, who makes space and who fills it instead. The trap is that this system works invisibly. You don't wake up deciding to monitor response times or note who initiates plans. Your nervous system just does it, comparing their effort against your own like a scale that never quite stops moving. And here's what makes it so sticky. The imbalance detector doesn't always tell the truth. Sometimes people are genuinely busy. Sometimes someone shows love differently than you expect it. Sometimes a slow text means nothing about how they feel, but your nervous system doesn't have access to those nuances. It only knows the pattern, and patterns feel like facts the moment they repeat. The real danger shows up when you start adjusting your behavior based on what you think you've measured. You pull back a little to match their energy. You stop reaching out. You leave messages unread longer. Now you're not just observing the imbalance, you're creating one, and the other person hasn't even realized the invisible game started. The move that matters is this: when you catch yourself keeping score, pause and get curious instead of certain. Ask whether you're reading a temporary situation as permanent or mistaking different expression for less care. One honest conversation about how you each show up often dissolves what looked like a mathematical problem before it hardens into distance. Sunk cost in relationships. You've been with someone for 5 years. The relationship hasn't felt right in 2 of them, but you stay because of what you've already put in: the time, the shared memories, the plans you made together. Your brain whispers, if you leave now, all of that was wasted. So you stay longer, hoping to make it worth something, watching more days disappear into a slow ache instead of a clean break. That's sunk cost at work, and it feels exactly like loyalty, because loyalty and entrapment wear the same disguise from the inside. Here's the trap. Those 5 years existed. They happened. They shaped you. Walking away doesn't erase them or make them meaningless, but staying to justify them absolutely does. Because now you're not choosing the relationship for what it is or what it could become. You're choosing it for what it already was, which is a ghost. You're negotiating with a past that can't change no matter how much present you feed it. We do this everywhere: money, careers, hobbies. But relationships twist the knife deeper because we're afraid of becoming the person who gave up, who wasted their heart on something temporary. And so we trade sunk time for more sunk time, compounding the loss, telling ourselves it's honorable when really it's just fear in a noble costume. The pain becomes evidence that we care, and caring becomes evidence that we should stay. But here's what whispers back: you don't owe your future to your past, not in work, not in hobbies, and especially not in love. The decision to stay should rest on one question only: would you choose this exact thing right now, today, knowing everything you know? If the answer is no, then you're not being loyal, you're being stuck, and there's a difference that matters. Devaluation after conquest. You finally get the text back. You finally lock eyes across the room. You finally hear the yes, and something in your chest goes quiet in a way you didn't expect. That electric wanting that kept you awake for weeks, it doesn't evaporate, it deflates. The person who felt magnetic yesterday suddenly looks flatter today, less special, less worthy of the energy you were spending. The hunger was the whole story, and now that hunger is fed, the plot just ends. Your brain has a problem with completion. Desire is engineered to pull you forward, to reach, to pursue across distance and doubt. The moment that gap closes, the moment the chase resolves into certainty, the circuit that was making sparks simply has nothing to push against anymore. You were never really chasing them. You were chasing the reaching itself. Your nervous system got hooked on the tension, the uncertainty, the delicious possibility that you might fail and have to keep wanting. That friction between hope and fear is almost narcotic. When it vanishes, when the outcome becomes guaranteed, there's a hollow ache where the longing used to live, and your mind starts hunting for what's wrong with the prize, as if something must be defective to explain why the hunt feels over. This pattern shows up everywhere. The job you desperately needed becomes soul-draining by month 3. The relationship you fought through fire for stops feeling like a win and starts feeling like a trap. Not because you chose wrong, but because your brain confuses the absence of struggle with the presence of disappointment. You learn to measure love by how hard you had to work for it. Now that you have it, it feels like surrender instead of arrival. The next time you feel that hollow drop after getting what you wanted, don't immediately assume something is broken. Maybe your nervous system is just grieving the end of the hunt, not the beginning of the thing itself. Contrast effect on partners. You remember exactly where you were when your partner suddenly looked beautiful, not because they changed, but because you had just come from somewhere else. A long day at work surrounded by tired faces, a stressful family dinner, a bleak commute home. Then they walked in, and there it was, that surge of attraction, almost like relief. Your brain doesn't rate your partner on some absolute scale. It rates them relative to whatever was just in front of you. If you've been doom scrolling for an hour through curated images of people half your age, then your real partner looks ordinary by comparison. If you just got off a call with your ex or left a room full of tension, your partner looks like safety itself. The same person, different contrast. This means your attraction isn't stable, it's contextual, and you can shape it. Spend time around people who drain you, then come home and notice what shifts. Scroll the beautiful people, then turn to the actual one beside you and watch how they land differently. It's not shallow, it's how perception works. But here's the harder part. Your partner is also constantly measuring you against other things, other people, other versions of themselves, other possibilities they might have chosen instead. If they're always comparing you to someone else, a coworker, an old flame, an imaginary ideal, your light dims without you knowing it. You're no longer the contrast, you're the baseline. The antidote isn't competing harder for the spotlight, it's becoming intentional about the contrast you live in together. Create rituals that separate you from the noise. Phone-free dinners, time away from other people's feeds, moments where your time together becomes the vivid thing, the thing everything else gets measured against. When you do, your partner stops being rated. They become the scale, anchoring on first impression. You walk into a room and someone's watching you. In the first 3 seconds, before you even speak, their brain is already building a file, confident or nervous, attractive or plain, trustworthy or guarded. That first read sticks, not because it's accurate, but because it becomes the baseline everything else gets measured against. If someone decides you're funny in that first moment, they'll laugh at things you say later that aren't even jokes. If they decide you're unreliable because you showed up 5 minutes late, they'll remember every delayed text for months while forgetting the times you came early. Their brain isn't lying to them, it's just filtering reality through that first snapshot. seeing what it expects to see. In attraction, this gets sharper and more unforgiving. Someone might think you're mysterious because you were quiet at the start, so your later honesty reads as vulnerability instead of just being yourself. Or they decide you're arrogant from one self-assured comment, and your confidence after that feels like proof instead of personality. The anchor colors everything that follows, rewriting the meaning of neutral moments. The quiet trap is that you can't unsee it once it's there. A person can change, get more interesting, show you sides they were hiding, and the other person might still be comparing all of it to that original frame, waiting for it to match again. They're not doing this consciously. Their brain is just protecting the story it already told. Here's the move. Don't obsess over perfecting those first seconds because that makes you stiff and forgettable. Instead, understand that whoever's looking at you is already writing a story. Give them small, real moments to work with, something that makes the anchor less a cage and more just a starting point they might actually want to question. Thin slicing chemistry judgment. You walk into a room and within 5 seconds, you know, not consciously, not with words, but your nervous system has already whispered something to the person across from you. I feel it, or I don't. That snap decision isn't recklessness, it's thin slicing, a survival skill your brain inherited from moments when chemistry either meant trust or danger. Your sensory system is reading 1,000 microsignals at once. The tempo of their breath, whether their pupils dilated when you arrived, the angle of their shoulders, the frequency of their blink. Your conscious mind hasn't assembled these into sentences yet, but your body is already voting. The trap is that you'll justify this feeling afterwards with reasons that sound logical. They seem trustworthy. They're easy to talk to. These are the stories your brain writes to make sense of something that happened below words. You'll feel certain about your judgment because it came with certainty, not because you gathered evidence. And certainty is sticky. It wraps itself around every small interaction that follows and rejects anything that contradicts it. Here's what matters. Thin slicing does work better than random chance, especially for detecting basic honesty and baseline interest, but it fails spectacularly when you mistake the feeling of recognition for the fact of compatibility. You feel chemistry with someone because something in their energy mirrors an old wound or an old hunger in you, and your system rings the alarm saying, yes or no. But that alarm isn't measuring whether they're actually good for you. It's measuring whether they're familiar. The person who feels magnetic might be the person who will teach you something about yourself you're not ready to learn. Attraction sometimes knows something. Sometimes it's just noise dressed as knowing, costly signaling commitment. You know that person who flew across the country unannounced to show up at your door? Or the one who rearranged their entire week just to help you move? Or the partner who learned your family's obscure inside jokes just to make your relatives laugh? There is something about sacrifice, real, visible, inconvenient sacrifice that rewires how we feel about someone's devotion. It is not the words that land. It is the cost. When someone gives up something valuable for you, your nervous system stops analyzing and starts trusting. Evolutionary psychologists call this costly signaling, and it exists because fakers cannot afford to keep it up. A lie is cheap. Showing up consistently when it hurts is not. Your brain learned long ago that actions with a real price tag are harder to fake than promises. This is why grand gestures matter less than unglamorous consistency, the small sacrifices that nobody applauds but everybody notices, the partner who stays patient during a bad month, the friend who keeps asking about your therapy even though you never ask back, the person who remembers you prefer bitter coffee and orders it for you without being asked. These are not flashy. They cost time, attention, energy, and yes, sometimes money, yet they shape attraction and trust far more than a single romantic weekend getaway. When someone pays a price, genuine, private, unglamorous, they are signaling that your welfare matters enough to move their own needle. And because that cost is real, your attachment system knows it means something. The quiet ones stick. So pay attention not just to the big gestures, but to the small, expensive ones, the repeated choices that eat into someone's day or comfort or resources. That is where you find out who actually counted you worth the price. Over time, those small costs compound into a kind of proof your system cannot dismiss. Grand gestures as proof. You get flowers delivered to your office, a handwritten note, a surprise trip booked. Your heart does that thing where it jumps and suddenly you feel seen, chosen, loved. And in that moment, the big gesture feels like proof. Proof that someone cares. Proof that the relationship matters. Proof that you were right to trust them. But here's what's tricky. A grand gesture is often less about proving love and more about performing it. And there's a gap between those two things that almost nobody talks about. The person who sends flowers might do it because they genuinely adore you, or they might do it because they messed up and need to restore your faith. Or they might do it because grand gestures feel easier than showing up consistently on a Wednesday when you're tired and they're tired and there's no audience. The gesture gets all the oxygen. The small stuff, remembering how you take your coffee, asking how your day actually was, being present when nothing special is happening. That's the real infrastructure of attraction and care. But it doesn't announce itself. It just sits there quietly, building trust. And the risk is this: you start believing the grand gesture more than the texture of everyday life. You let one big moment erase months of smaller neglect. Or you interpret a lack of grand gestures as a sign of waning love, when really someone might be showing devotion in ways that don't photograph well or feel performative. The people who stick around long-term aren't usually the ones keeping a running highlight reel of gestures. They're the ones who show up. The question to sit with is not, did they make a grand gesture, but do they show up for me when nobody's watching? Jealousy as a tension signal. Your partner mentions someone else had a funny observation during their day, and something shifts in your chest before you even know why. The jealousy rises first, then the story arrives to explain it. But what if the jealousy itself is the real information, not the threat? What if it's your nervous system sending a signal in a language you've learned to ignore? Jealousy is fundamentally about attention scarcity. It flares when you notice someone or something is pulling focus or investment away from the bond you believed was protected. It doesn't always mean danger. It means you've registered a shift. The person who feels no jealousy is often the one not paying attention to what they're getting or not getting. Most of us are taught to see jealousy as weakness, something to shame away or deny, so we bury the signal instead of reading it. And that's when jealousy becomes corrosive. It ferments underground, turning into resentment or paranoia because we never asked what it was trying to tell us. The cleaner move is to feel it, then get curious. What did I notice? Am I getting less? Less of what exactly? Time, interest, the sense that I matter. Sometimes the answer is yes, and you have something real to discuss. Sometimes the answer is no, and you've just identified an old wound that flares when you feel forgotten. Either way, You have actual information now instead of a feeling you're ashamed of. Jealousy becomes destructive when it's unexamined, but it becomes useful when you treat it like a small knock on the door, not an intruder, just a signal that something in the system needs tending. That awareness alone shifts how you show up in the next conversation, and often that's where the real work lives. Triangulation, manipulation tactic. Your person is being unusually quiet about why they canceled your plans. You ask twice, nothing. Then, suddenly, they mention in passing that a friend told them you said something unkind about them at a party you didn't attend. The accusation arrives wrapped in someone else's voice, and now you're too flustered to remember that original conversation about the canceled plans. That shift is triangulation. And it works because it pulls a third person into the center of your intimacy without their knowledge or consent, turning a private conflict into something that feels public and witnessed. Triangulation thrives on bypass. Instead of telling you they're angry, they bring a phantom witness into the room. Sometimes it's an ex who did things better. Sometimes it's a family member who agrees you're wrong. Sometimes it's a vague everyone says that never existed. The real target isn't the third person, it's you. They're trying to make you feel less solid in your own reality, less confident in your own judgment, because they've imported outside authority into a moment that should belong only to the two of you. What makes it stick is that you often can't prove its manipulation. You can't call the third party to verify. You're left defending yourself against a game nobody told you was being played. And if you push back, if you say that sounds made up, you become the unreasonable one, the jealous one, the one who doesn't want them to have other people in their life. You've been turned into the problem, which was the goal all along. The move when conflict suddenly includes a phantom witness. Pause hard and ask directly, "Are you angry with me? Let's talk about that. Just us." Don't accept the third party as evidence. Their presence in your argument is almost always a sign that someone is avoiding something harder, and you don't have to follow them there. Push-pull dynamic tension. There's a moment in the early weeks of seeing someone when you text them something vulnerable and they go quiet for a few hours. Your stomach drops. Then they text back something equally honest. Suddenly you feel closer than you did before. That shift from uncertainty to closeness is the drug, not the closeness itself, the oscillation. A push-pull dynamic is what happens when desire lives in the space between connection and distance. You step closer, they step back slightly, or you sense they might. You pull away to protect yourself, and they suddenly reach for you. Neither of you is playing chess. You're both just scared of getting hurt while also terrified of being alone. But the result is intoxicating because your nervous system never settles. It stays lit, alert, alive. This is why some people stay in relationships that don't serve them, not because they love the person, but because the person is unpredictable enough to keep activating their attachment system. A consistent, warm partner feels boring by comparison because there's no more mystery to solve. The anxious part of you that learned to interpret every signal, every silence, every tone has nothing to do. Your brain craves the puzzle more than the piece. The real trap is mistaking intensity for intimacy. A push-pull partner can feel like a soulmate because being with them feels like coming home after years away, but what you're actually addicted to is the relief that comes after the strain. That relief is available from almost anyone who occasionally withholds and occasionally gives, from any dynamic that keeps you off balance enough to stay engaged. If you notice yourself pulled towards someone mercurial, towards someone you have to work to keep, ask yourself one quiet question. Am I attracted to them or to the challenge of them? Because that's the difference between a relationship and a puzzle you can't put down. Breadcrumbing false hope. You get a text at 11 p.m. from someone you thought had disappeared 3 months ago, a single emoji. Nothing that demands a response, but everything that says, I'm still thinking of you. You read it 5 times, you don't sleep well, 2 weeks pass, nothing, then a like on an old photo, then a story view. It is designed to keep you warm without ever actually committing to heat, and it works because your brain fills in the gaps with hope instead of honesty. This is breadcrumbing, the art of leaving just enough to keep someone emotionally available while refusing to offer anything real. What makes it so sticky is not the crumbs themselves, but what they trigger in you. A single word of contact can rewrite a whole narrative of rejection into something that feels like maybe. Your nervous system hasn't released them yet, so it jumps at any signal, any proof that you are worth remembering. The longer you've been apart, the hungrier you become for even tiny scraps of attention. You rationalize every crumb as meaningful. They sent a message, so they must still care. They are busy. They are thinking of you. Any story beats the one where you were simply forgotten. The quiet cruelty is that breadcrumbing requires no commitment and offers no future. It is not a courtship. It is not a slow burn. It is someone keeping you available in their peripheral vision in case they want you when nothing better is happening. You remain tethered to someone who has already chosen not to show up. You are just not allowed to move on. The move here is brutal but simple. Treat a crumb as what it is, not what it promises. If someone wants you, they will do more than leave a trail. They will actually walk toward you.